Hey friends, welcome to my channel. So today we are gonna see, what if Issei became the dragon of infinite sin? So before we start, check out my Patreon page for 18p. Plus exclusive mature content. We will now proceed to the video. Long ago, before the universe was even brought into existence, there was only light and darkness, two opposing forces that clashed endlessly without thought nor reason. The light represented law, order, justice, and righteousness. Darkness on the other hand represented destruction, anarchy, chaos, and ruin. These two powers clashed violently, causing violent ripples all across the realm with no end in sight. It was not until their most violent clash that the two powers had unintentionally created an anomaly, with their powers violently clashing against one another. The two sides clashed, and in doing so caused an implosion of the two powers, which set off a chain event that both created and destroyed. Both light and darkness were reduced to nothing as their powers created and destroyed, shaped and molded the universe in one giant megaton supernova. So powerful it was, it ripped apart the fabric of reality and molded it back again 100 times as the universe and all life that came with it was sown. But in the end of light and darkness, in their place was two separate entities. They had no bodies of their own, just a floating mass of the combined powers of light and darkness, the firstborn, the aspect of their essence of having no birth nor end, and that entity was known by one name, eternity. The younger of the two, formed by the birth of the universe and the nothingness of its creator's end, was named infinity. These two entities were different from light and darkness, for they shared sentient thought, the first beings to ever have a self-thinking process in all of creation. It was upon seeing the creation and devastation of that which was caused by their creators that eternity had decided to live its life as that which represented by light and darkness as a balance. Therefore in modern days, it has been come to be known simply as death, the formless entity that ended all life, while infinity, seeking to see whose a different route from its partner, had chosen to seek out a place of quietness, a place of solitude. Thus, infinity solemnly diverted from eternity, never imagining to see it again. And so with he two powers leaving from what is once an endless struggle of two opposing powers, the resulting explosion created life. Life blossomed all over the cosmos, but at the very center of the explosion was a single planet formed by the powers of both light and darkness. This planet was soon to be known as Earth, and with it new life would begin to blossom by younger sentient beings that would soon call themselves gods, which would rule different directions of the earth. But as infinity stayed in solitude and would come to birth itself from the nothingness of its existence, death on the other hand in its formless shape and power would choose to ravage the world, casting its shadow upon all those that were within its grasp. Humans, animals, and the supposed gods alike were unable to escape death's reign over their very souls. Soon the very mention of the word death would be the seed that would implant itself into the hearts of all sentient beings. They would come to fear death as they should. Or death was eternal, and nothing was beyond its cold, soul-tearing grip. But like its partner, death or eternity sought to have a material body, but none were so worthy to be the embodiment of its power, the reincarnation of its very existence. That is, until countless millennia had passed, that death had finally found it had found its perfect reincarnation. Hospital labor room. I am truly sorry about your loss, Mr. and Mrs. Hyodo. We did all we could, but it is beyond us now. A doctor spoke with his head hung low. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and facial hair with softened black eyes. His voice ran deep and felt like 1,000 knives stabbing into the two heartbroken were-to-be parents. Mr. Hyodo felt tears drop from his eyes, but his arms circled his wife, who was still sitting in her bed. The very same she had not long ago given birth to their first child. Mrs. Hyodo was a complete wreck at that very moment. When those words were spoken, the woman broke down in racking sobs. The mother-to-be had at that very moment felt as if her heart had been torn to shreds, and her soul felt as if it were shattered like glass. Why, he was healthy, he was bright, and so full of life in my womb, and now when he's born, why? Mr. Hyodo tightened his hold on his wife, trying in vain to ease her pain, but it was not to be. It was just so strange. Their son they had already named had been possibly the liveliest baby the doctors had ever seen. Moving more than most other unborn children did, but on the day his wife's tear broke and he was to come out into the world, all activity from the baby stopped. After he came out, it was as all life from their son had been snuffed out in an instant the moment he was born. Why, it just wasn't fair. Did death find some sort of sick twisted amusement in ending lives that hadn't even seen their first ray of light? Took their first breath and saw the world for the first time. There had been no signs of infection or knots in the umbilical cord, no defects in his body, nor were his organs bad. Their son had just died for unknown and unexplainable reasons. "I am so sorry, honey," he said before casting a painful gaze to the small bed that held their now dead newborn, a clean white blanket covering the baby's body completely. Perhaps to hide it so seeing the child wouldn't hurt them more than it currently already was. They had the name picked out, had all the preparations made in his room ready for him to come home to, only for the harsh reality to come crashing down on them. There would be no baby coming home with them. "My little Issei, why, she wailed in his arms as the doctor stood aside, painfully mourning for their loss, loathing himself for his failure in saving the child even if it was beyond his control. So it was in that moment many would come to believe the life of a newborn had been snuffed out, cut at the bud before the child could experience the bright and warmth that was life. Or was it, completely unseen by them all, single orb of mixing colors ranging from black, red, white, blue, purple and green descended upon them. It floated, and by some sentient force of its own will, the orb directed itself to the still newborn lying in its crib. It was then the orb floated toward the dead child and slowly began sink itself into the newborn's body. Going through the white fabric covering the newborn, the orb simply infused itself into the child's body and fused itself with the soul of the child that had yet to be taken. And as if some miracle had come down to bless these two heartbroken parents, the blanket shifted, "Uwa, wah." The sudden wail of a newborn caused all three adults to freeze up before the doctor snapped his head in the direction from where it was coming from, and when he did his eyes bulged in shock. The Hyodos on the other hand were frozen in stunned silence at the shocking miracle that was happening before them. "Waahh. Wah." The baby continued to cry, and soon the doctor was broken from his shock and quickly went to the child and pulled the blanket off the newborn. It was to his further shock that he saw a lively newborn baby struggling to get out of the confines of its crib. The doctor's professional mind began racing. He was sure the baby was dead as dead could be. No heartbeat, no pulse, the child wasn't breathing, it showed no visible signs of life whatsoever. "See, could it have been possible I missed something? No, I checked everything. This baby was dead." Now he was not a religious man by any stretch of the word. He preferred the way of medicine and science than an unseen entity that you prayed would fix all your problems. But this was no all his years experienced before. This was truly out of his field of expertise. "Issei, my baby, he's alive," the mother muttered out as she saw the doctor looking down at the lively newborn in a great deal of shock. Still he suppressed it as much as he could and gently wrapped the baby up in his blanket. Making sure he was wrapped up safely, he turned to the parents and gave a big smile to the shocked parents. "Yes, it would seem this boy has someone, or something watching over him. See, congratulations you two, you have given birth to a healthy baby boy," he said, handing the young newborn to his father, and to their surprise his cries quickly stopped once he was in the presence of his father and mother. Sitting down next his wife, he handed Issei to her, but was mindful to heck his son for anything that could affect his health at any given point. When Mrs. Hyodo got Issei, her tears fell even more, though now they were tears of absolute joy once she saw her son, Issei's brown eyes full of innocence looking up at her in awe and childish wonder. So overcome with joy the woman hugged her child, her little Issei, with all the gentle motherly care she could muster. "Oh, my little Issei, our baby, our little miracle." Indeed, it seemed the happy Hyodo couple was now a family. 17 years later, walking along the streets of Kyoto was crowds of people ranging from businessmen and women to school students. Men and women to even parents going out to shop or going to their school. Out of them all, it was mostly school students that were heading for their residential academy, and many among them were kids and some were teenagers. It was crowded on both sides of the sidewalk like it always was, but it was never as crowded as it was in the streets of Tokyo. Among these academy students, which the majority seemed to be teenage girls, were all seemingly staring at something in particular, then looking away before giggling with blushes on their face. Typical reactions the girls gave when they saw the person that had their attention. The person in question, however, did not seem to be joined with the other students. In fact, it seemed as if the student altogether was keeping distance from them. It was a male wearing the same uniform as the other rare male students, consisting of a short-sleeved white dress shirt with a black ribbon around the collar, but over his dress shirt he wore just a black shirt. He wore black dress pants and black dress shoes and held his bangs slung over his shoulder. The male in question had short brown hair with a couple of bangs falling around his light brown eyes. He had a slightly, but healthy pale complexion, and for his age he was very well built. He stood a good 6 feet and having the body of a swimmer, one could easily tell the definitio N of his physique through his shirt alone, broad shoulders, and a slightly large torso with a hint of a six-pack. His arms were wiry, but were packed with muscle which were coiled and ready to be released at any moment's notice. He had a chiseled jawline with not a flab of any baby fat whatsoever on any part of his face, and his eyes seemed a tad sharp, what with the slightly golden look in his brownish eyes. The teenager in question seemed to just ignore the looks he was getting and was just more busy reading a book in hand titled Mythology 42 edition. The teen was so cut off from the rest of the world that he seemed to just ignore the looks he got from his female academic peers. But in reality their giggling and non-stop staring was starting to annoy him. "I can never get a break, it seems, no matter where I go," thought the male, who let out a small sigh as he continued reading his book. Hyodo Issei, age 17, was not your typical 17-year-old academy student. While he seemed average with a healthy physique that would mistake him for someone that was heavily into sports such as swimming or track, the fact was he wasn't into much sports besides some martial arts and gymnastics which he was put into as a kid. He wasn't much of a friendly person and was sort of loner, but could remain polite when he needed to be. The only couple of friends he had he could count on his fingers, which was just one at the current moment, but she was all the up in England and they hadn't seen each other in years. But what made him different from others was because of his rather unique ability. Something he's had for as long as he could remember. It was something that scared him at first, but so far he'd grown used to it as if it were an everyday occurrence, which it was. Issei felt a twitch in his brow once he heard the girls giggling again, and soon a small scowl formed. It was the same wherever he went. The girls that saw him always reacted that way, and it was starting to annoy. Don't get him wrong, he was a straight man. But most females he ever came across besides his old friend were just hormone-driven teenagers who couldn't decide for themselves and let their hormones do it for them. It irked him more than he would admit, since he would only be interested in a woman that could be just a bit mature. Which ruled out about 99% of his generation. Why do you continue to not take advantage of your position here? Kid, any man would just die to be in your shoes. The twitch in his brow increased even more so before he glanced at the person that spoke. But the thing was, the person was not in human form. It was a spectral human man with square glasses and a perverted blush on his cheeks. His body was completely see-through and thankfully no one could see him besides him. Not that Issei really cared if they could or not. Thing is, you're already dead, so what could you even do besides peep under their skirts, you lecherous ghost? Besides, I don't wanna waste my time and shameless girls that can't even have some self-respect for themselves, but of course you wouldn't know that now, would you, you perverted tem? The teen mumbled under his breath so the others didn't see him talk. It was weird enough as it is, it was the basic norm for him, but others would see it like he was talking to thin air. Yes, that's right, Hyodo Issei, for as long as he could remember, had been able to see the spirits of the dearly departed. And it hadn't helped his life really. When he was young, many kids that saw him talk to thin air thought he was a freaking weird, some even bullied him as a kid. Teachers thought he was doing it to just pass the time and not paying attention, which resulted in a scolding. It also didn't help that every time he got really angry that he caused many strange things to happen. Like for instance, the grass he stood on would turn gray and completely die. If any small animals were in the area they would die. Squirrels would fall out of trees, wild birds would fall from the sky. He didn't know what it was, but since then had done everything he could to keep his anger in check. Yet in school it got so bad at times his parents had to transfer to different schools a few times just to escape the chaos. He'd told his parents at a young age that he could see things they couldn't, and at first they were understandably worried, but considering his unique birth they figured it had to be a side effect or something. Yes. He'd known of his birth when his parents told him about it when he was 15 years of age, and it had surprised him to a shocking degree, and it made him wonder just how exactly had he come back from death. Nevertheless, this wasn't the only thing that made him strange. For as long as he could remember, Issei had also been incredibly more fit than kids his age. He had more stamina than others, He was faster, more flexible and stronger than most his generation, which his father saw and suggested for him to take up a self-defense course, and his mother suggested some gymnastics. So for much of his growth he trained himself to be at his peak until it became something of second nature for him. Wake up, morning exercises, eat breakfast, exercise. Go to school, use gym as a means to exercise, go home in a slight jog, eat supper, exercise, take a shower, then go to bed. Rinse and repeat a scene after both his classes in martial arts and gymnastics were done with. It didn't hurt to be physically fit, and it passed the time for him in his somewhat abnormal lifestyle. Hey, now I am no pervert. I just have a healthy liking for the female body, hehehehe. The perverted soul stated, causing Issei's eyes to close in irritation. Sure, whatever you say, and I'm guessing the fact your nose is somehow bleeding and you're chuckling like a perverted old hermit doesn't mean anything, he mumbled before he pulled up his hand and somehow flicked the spirit in the head. And somehow it hit. Ow, you're mean. I bet all kinds of pleasurable women up in heaven, he said as the spot Issei flicked glowed a golden circle before his soul started to fade. Whatever, now just go to heaven or hell, whichever place suits you, you lecherous old goat, he said, freeing the perverted old man's spirit from the living world and sending it to where it needs to be sent. That had been something else he had been able to do. If he was intent to send a soul and free it from its shackles, he could do so. If he was intending on it, that is. Sighing once again glanced away from his book, which he soon saw his new school a few feet from him now. Since his last school had proven to be even more troublesome, he transferred himself to the next academy near his house, which had been Kuo Academy, which had at one point been a private all-girls school. But recently it switched to co-ed, so male students were allowed to enter. And since the academy was separate from other schools he went to, he was hopeful no one would recognize him. Things like that always resulted in fights he would win, mind you, but fights nonetheless. Closing his book, he pocketed it before he walked through the school gates, admiring its structure with a raised eyebrow. Looks nice, and it was, but since it was once a private academy it suspected it to be on the fancier side of things. So it was with admiring the sights I began to walk along to the building, intent to get his papers and class schedule. But as he was making his way, his eyes caught sight of a large gathering of both male and female students alike, all shouting and or screaming in joy. Oh, Rias Oni-sama looks lovely as ever today. You're so beautiful, Grimoire senpai. Rias, Grimoire, shrugging, Issei continued on, but as he walked past the crowd he felt a pair of eyes absolutely boring into his back. Yet he figured it was some girl again and decided to ignore it as he went inside the building. But it was in fact the center of the crowd's attention, a girl with a rather buxom figure. Long crimson-red hair fell down to her thighs while one strand of hair stuck up. Her blue-green eyes were smoldering as she watched the single boy that hadn't turned to her kept walking into the academy building. An excited, almost benevolent smile formed on her face as she twirled a piece of her hair as she watched the strange yet very interesting boy walk on. So he's the transfer student Akino told me would be enrolling here, but who would have thought he would have such dark aura around him? It's not evil though, it's just cold. Yes, very interesting, you interest me. My intriguing kohai, the young redhead thought with her smile growing just a tad more. Classroom. Okay class, before we begin, I would just like to say we are having a new student starting here today. He's just transferred, so please welcome him with open arms, the teacher said before turning to Issei. Okay, introduce yourself, young man. Issei nodded to the teacher before turning to the class, and immediately he received mixed looks from the class. From the girls he expected the reaction, which was in the form of mass giggling, blushes, whispers that he could clearly hear. But he chose to ignore them and their hungry looks. From the boys he just felt his brow twitch in annoyance once he saw most of the boys cursing him and glaring at him with extreme hate and loathing for there being another pretty boy, as they called him. He even spotted two guys in the back cursing his very existence, and for the life of him he just couldn't find the urge to care nor acknowledge them for that matter. So putting up a stoic expression he spoke to the class. Hey, my name is Hyodo Issei. I don't have much to say about myself besides that I am new here. I hope we can get along, so please take care of me, he said with a bow. The teacher seemed fine with his introduction and nodded. Very good, Hyodo-san, now why don't you go take a seat beside Ms. Amano-san, the teacher said. Raising an eyebrow, he turned to see a girl with long black hair and violet eyes brimming with innocence as she raised her hand to get his attention. "Over here, Hyodo-san." Seeing her, he nodded before going to the desk beside her. Setting his stuff down, he sat and was about to look to the front of the class until he felt someone tap him on the shoulder. Glancing to his right, he saw Yuma looking at him with a smile, but because he was naturally bored out of his mind, he never saw the slightest flinch from her shoulders when he looked her way. "By Azazel-sama, such a dark aura." "I knew Azazel-sama," said the kid. Naturally gave off such an aura, but this is insane. "Hello, my name is Amano Yuma. It is a pleasure to meet you, Hyodo Issei-kun," she sighed. While reaching out with her hand, and Issei seemed to eye for a good moment, and if he had been a tad sharper he would have seen the nervous sweat going down the back of her neck which was caused fro. Her seeing his abnormally light brown eyes flash gold when he looked at her. Single quote ellipsis dot. "Likewise," he said, clasping her small hand in his own, and for a moment Issei swore he felt a strange energy from the girl, but instantly shrugged it off. He then turned his attention back to the front while Yuma seemed to hold her hand underneath her desk. Smile in place, but inwardly the girl was having a near mental breakdown. No. Being near him is terrifying enough, but simply touching. I swear I felt my very soul start screaming. What is this guy? Is he even human? The girl thought in panic. Her hand almost felt numb, as if she had touched something so cold it numbed all nerves in her hand. Clenching her hand a few times, Yuma glanced discreetly at the Hyodo boy and a small frown began to appear. "So he's the guy Azazel-sama said to watch over, but Kokubile-sama said to kill him the next chance I get, and I can't defy Kokubile, he'll kill me without hesitation." Distraught with what to do, the girl placed her face in her hands, unaware that Issei saw her slight stare, and he frowned. "Oi, you alright?" he spoke, causing Yuma to flinch before she looked to see Issei gazing at her with a slight concerned expression. For a moment Yuma thought she would have felt that dark cold aura again, but his eyes just showed concern for her, so she just eased up a bit. Letting her cheeks grow a tad pink, she showed a small smile towards the Hyodo. "Why yeah, don't worry about me, Hyodo-kun," she said, causing him to scowl, which made her feel nervousness rise up since she thought to have angered him. Yet he just turned away and spoke with his gaze to the forefront. "Alright if you say so, but just call me Issei. I am not one for formalities," he said, which made her blink before nodding her head. Very well, Issei-kun," she questioned, which made him nod. "Better than before, Yuma-san," he said, and with that the two began listening to the teacher and let time pass by. It wasn't until school had ended that Issei was beginning to leave the school building, and he ignored the stares and looks he got from the other students. Some more than others, he thought, staring a tad too deeply at him, which had been what happened at lunch. "I swear it felt like that girl's eyes were boring straight through me or something," the Hyodo thought to himself, remembering the sight of the girl who he caught staring at him from across the hall. He didn't get a good description of her besides her V and red glasses. The stare down didn't last before the girl walked leaving him behind with a confused frown. "Doesn't matter, I guess, as long as I don't make enemies here then I should be good," he said, but inwardly he just knew somehow or some way he would make enemies. That's how it always was since he was young. Whether it be with his fellow students or with teachers, he just couldn't get along with any of them. So deep in his thoughts he never heard the shouts of his name. "Sei-kun, Issei-kun, wait." The Hyodo stopped and turned to see, to his surprise, Amano Yuma behind him with a cheerful expression in place. Tilting his head, Issei spoke, "Yuma. What is it?" The cheerful girl seemed to lean side to side with an ever-cheerful expression. "I was just wondering, I know this is our first day meeting, but can we be friends?" Shy. Why spoken Yuma seemed embarrassed by asking him this. But for Issei, having friends was something akin to be impossible for him, since everyone was either afraid of him or thought him as some sort of freak or weirdo. Girls mostly saw him as eye candy, but when they got to know him they would give him the cold shoulder just like everyone else. It's why he only had one true friend, which made her all the more precious. Maybe it was his paranoid nature or something, but his gaze turned cold and emotionless as he gazed back down at Yuma, who once again under that abnormal gaze. Those brown orbs saw him. How flickered to a cold gold made her nearly quiver in her shoes. He was sure Yuma had felt his dark aura the moment she shook his hand, and yet she was still wanting to be friends when in other cases people would run away with fearful eyes. So yeah, he was just a tad suspicious. After a moment or two though he just shrugged, I guess. I was heading to get something to eat. You're welcome to join me if you want. He said, making Yuma's smile grow. I would love to. And thus the two walked side by side leaving the academy grounds. Yet as they left, Issei couldn't shake the feeling of being stared at, but had no idea as to where or why. The same feeling he'd felt the moment he entered his new academy. And he was right. Standing atop the academy building, 3 females stood watching Issei leave the academy. One being Rias Grimori herself. The second was a buxom young woman who was around the same age as Rias. She had long black hair which was tied with an orange ribbon and in a ponytail that went down to her legs, and violet eyes that seemed to twinkle in amusement and the slight bit of mischief. Like Rias and the other girl, she wore the academy female uniform along with knee-high black socks. The other female was a petite girl around the same height as Rias. She had a milky white complexion with black hair which was styled in a bob cut. Her violet eyes covered with red rammed glasses were narrowed as she watched Issei and Yuma leave the gates, an ever-permanent expression of study and the smallest bit of interest. So what do you think, Akeno, Sona? An interesting man he is, that Hyodo Issei, Rias said, causing her fellow buxom-haired friend and queen to smile even bigger as she leaned her face onto her hand. Urara, I must agree, Bushu, our little Kohai is a very intriguing man. He's got such a dark and sinister aura coming off him. Tilda, it's giving me goosebumps. Fufufu tilde. She giggled while Sona just closed her eyes and pushed up her glasses. I will agree that he has earned my attention. Never have I felt such a dark aura in all my life. I've not felt something that cold in all my years. Not even Onisama's presence had ever given off something so frigid. And I believe Hyodo-san doesn't even know just how dense his aura is and how far it reaches. But I have seen that he is quite aware of the stares he receives, but chooses to ignore them. Which leads me to believe that he's used to it. The student council president hummed in thought as Rias just smiled. Indeed, and it would seem the others have sensed it too. Azazel Hour 80 has his fallen angels watching him, which is the case for that Yuma girl. But I do find some amusement that while she tries to hide it, the fallen angel is completely terrified of our Kohai. IAS commented, causing Akeno to giggle while Sona just sighed. It's to be expected. The first time I felt this aura, I felt as if I had a sword pressed at my throat and the slightest movement would cause it to slit my throat. It's just pure deadly, and yet I'm amazed the boy has such control to keep it check. The fallen angel that's with him is the closest anyone's got to him, such she must be feeling the full effects of it, unlike us. There is no telling what it's like. Sona drifted off with Rias and Akeno agreeing with her on that statement. It took her some effort to calm the rest of her peerage down when they too felt the aura enter the academy grounds, and poor Kaneko had been hit by it the worst due thanks to her being sensitive to the chakra or life force of everything around her. The poor Nekosho had burst into a fit of cries and whimpers while mumbling something about all the life around them was screaming at her that someone, or something, was killing it and sucking all life from the nature and the earth. Poor girl had to be put to sleep by a spell Rias used so she could calm her down and lay her to rest. Anyways, Rias, I'll be having my peerage on guard in case anything happens. And should it come to a worst case scenario, I'll contact my sister and see if she can do anything about it. You on the other hand should remain careful, but considering it's you, then you'll jump head first just to learn more about this boy, she said, knowing more about her childhood friend than most. And her assumption was proven correct when she saw Rias just give a hum while meeting her gaze. That's all she needed before walking away. She needed to warn her peerage and prepare them for anything, whatever this boy had. Whatever sacred gear he possessed had to be immensely street wrong if it was already leaking such an aura off the boy. Once Sona was gone, Akeno turned to her king. So what do you suggest, Bushu? She asked, making Rias think about it. Issei was clearly different from the other boys who fawned over beautiful women or the perverts she's seen hanging around the academy. He cared more for his academic studies than lusting after the opposite sex. Which she found endearing about him, since it was rare to find males in this school that acted that way. Thinking about it for a minute, Rias gave a sigh before looking to Akeno. I'll watch over him for the time being. Akeno, I want you to help Kiba take care of Kaneko until she's recovered from her incident. I'm sure she'll be very shaken, but help her ease into this aura. I on the other hand will keep my eye on our little Kohai. I can't trust that fallen angel to abide by Azazel's orders whatever they may be, but he would not order the death of a human for his or her sacred gear, but as I said, I don't trust that fallen angel. Hi Bushu, consider it done, but don't let anything happen to our cute little Kohai. Her face broke into a teasing smile which Rias just gave a small amused one in kind. Oh, don't worry, for some reason I think he won't go down without a fight. Call it intuition, but that's how she felt when she looked at Hyodo Issei. After all, someone who gives such a aura that it unnerves even as high-class devils will most definitely fight to their last. Thing was she, Akano, Sona would be prepared for what would come next. No one will be ready for what's to come. No one will be safe and no one will be able to escape it. The dark encroaching grip that ends life, snatches it away with the simplest of effort. The Lord of Death, the Reaper of Souls, the Shinigami by all aspects, will be born, very soon. Hyodo Issei, age 17, was as usual scowling, but it was much deeper than normal. He was currently walking alongside Amano Yuma, a friend he made at Kuo Academy, and the two were heading to said academy for another day of school. He could call Yuma a friend, but she was a much better to be around than most other students at this academy. Of course he'd seen her flinch and fidget nervously around him, which he was used to, but the girl still stuck around, so that deserved a point or two in his book. Yuma deserved that at the least. Since she stuck with him for his time with Kuo Academy so far, it had been a total of 1 month since he enrolled at the academic institution, and so far life for him had been decent enough. He did his work like any other student, was asked by couple of clubs if they would join due to his skills in gym. But he wasn't interested that much in sports, so he declined for the most part, but he had been asked if knew some kendo by the local female kendo club, and he had to say that he knew some. In truth he knew more than that, since he was trained the art of Budo, or the martial way. He had been introduced to a number of weapon styles to train with. He was given a general training in a few, but the one he took to the most was of the Sojutsu arts with a combination of Bojutsu and Tonfas. Since as young he took to training with a unique combination of both styles, and with his natural flexibility made him, in the words of his former sensei, a living storm. But Issei had chosen not to divulge that information to anyone. He already had enough trouble dealing with girls oogling him so openly and the boys cursing him wherever he went. He'd rather not have any more attention because it was just flat out irritating. Then again, trouble just keeps finding me, and this time it's my fault, the Hyodo thought with a scowl as he felt everyone staring at him. It's why he was scowling so deep today. The reason everyone was staring at him was because of his newest addition to his little group that once just consisted of him and Yuma. He looked to see it was that of a girl a bit younger than him, a first year at Kuo Academy. She was petite and about a head and a half shorter than himself. She had a healthy pale complexion. She had the most peculiar shade of white hair he'd ever seen, which had 2 bangs falling to her shoulders. Several loose bangs hung over her forehead, while in the back it was in a short bob cut. Her eyes were a hazel color which seemed to turn gold at times. He figured that was just his imagination. She had a black cat-shaped hair clip on both sides of her hair. The girl wore the usual Kuo Academy female uniform, only without the shoulder cape. The girl in question was Tuju Kaneko. The girl walked alongside him rather close, mind you, and she was currently chewing on some Pocky he'd bought her beforehand. The girl had a thing for sweets, it seemed. So yeah, as to the reason how he met this girl was something that made him remember just how much he was bullied when he was young, and he'd reacted without hesitation. It was just the attention he got. Afterwards just shot up right through the roof, which was incredibly annoying. Flashback -1 week ago. Issei sighed for what felt like the 4th time today. It's been 2 weeks so far that he's been enrolled at Kuo Academy, and while the days had been normal, he was still being hounded by the opposite sex. It seemed the girls at this academy were far more driven by their primal urges, and once a piece of eye candy could be found outside, the mass group of perverts that were in the academy basically made you the talk of the academy and made you rise up to the ranks of the more popular of the student body. But he couldn't honestly find it in himself to care what they thought of him. They didn't know him, nor did they know what he was like. They just labeled him, and to be quite frank, he just couldn't give a rat's ass about it. Academy was just an academy, a place to learn, not to gossip and cause an unnecessary amount of useless drama. Or at least that's how he saw it. Maybe he was a bit old-fashioned. Although I do kinda agree the amount of perverts here is just appalling. No wonder the girls here are so sensitive when someone that can act mature comes around, makes them go wild, he thought to himself as he easily eyed a few perverts in the hall he was walking in. Shockingly enough, he'd found out there was even a category of perverts that had been created just to figure who was what in this academy. Just goes to show just how bad the situation was here. He'd come across a few, two of which were in his class. The two named Motohama and Matsuda, two of what the girls said to be the perverted duo. He already knew the two disliked him, downright hated him, and he could say the same for them. They were incredibly annoying, one even announcing he'd mentally raped the girls with his eyes. Issei had slapped him upside the head hard enough to plant his face into the desk at that comment. Did he mention that Hyodo Issei despised perverts with a godly passion? Sure, it's in human nature to be attracted to the opposite sex. But going overboard with it to the point it's annoying the female gender. That should tell you something, idiots. He shook his head at the stupidity of his fellow male students. He was just glad his parents raised him correctly and in a good if a bit strict environment, what with all his training by his former senseis. Yet as Issei turned down the hall and began making his way to the school gates to meet up with Yuma, he heard a slight commotion on the side of the building. Feeling a rare moment of curiosity, he decided to investigate. It took only a moment to find out the commotion, which was a number of boys, possibly a couple of second and third years, standing around in a crowd. Raising an eyebrow, he listened in as they all laughed and began ring and taunting at supposedly someone in the crowd. "Ha ha, come on now, we won't bite, we just wanna see you dance a little, mascot-chan." One of the third years jeered, and his voice at that moment just grated on Issei's nerves. "Yeah, it's not good to ignore your senpais, ya know," another student taunted, and Issei saw through some movement of the idiots was that of a girl. A first year at that, with white hair, hazel eyes that seemed to be narrowed down at the ground. She had a white complexion and had two black cat-shaped hair clips on both sides of her hair. She wore the female uniform only without the shoulder cape. Then it all started to connect, and Issei's eyes narrowed dangerously as a scene of himself much younger than the girl was replaced in the same situation. Being bullied and picked on at a tender age until he was strong enough to fend for himself. The scene was all too familiar to him, and somewhere deep inside his mind Issei felt something begin to strain. It was only when he saw the girl's downcast expression that this strain broke. Issei for the first time in a long time felt his anger boil to its near breaking point. "Oh Issei-kun, there you are, what?" Yuma sighed. Only to go silent when she saw the Hyodo's eyes, and she flinched when his once light brown eyes glowing a menacing golden hue. She looked down at his fists and her eyes widened when she saw his clenched fingers coated in blood. He'd been clenching his fists so hard he pierced flesh. "Yuma, hang on to this for me," he said in a very clearly strained voice as he handed his bag of school supplies to her. The girl blinked before taking it without question, and she remained silent, deathly silent, as Issei made his way to the group. It was then the Amano saw what was happening, and she got back a shiver of terror that went up her spine. That's the first time I've ever seen him so angry. Yuma thought with a slight shiver. This mission was proving to be more difficult as she felt Issei's dark cold aura spike up in a way that every step he made the ground die beneath him. The sudden thought of actually just forgetting Kokobeel's demand to kill this boy made itself known. Because in all honesty she didn't want to anger this guy. While he had grown on her more than she would ever admit, she didn't want to anger this abysmal creature lurking behind those light brown eyes. And that's the honest truth, for the disguised watched the very clearly angry Hyodo walk to the seemingly ignorant boys, not knowing what was coming to them. "Oi oi," the group of boys seemed to have heard him and turned to see a scowling Issei walking towards them. The Hyodo saw the first-year girl glance at him, but he noticed the highly restrained flinch. He didn't care if the girl was scared of him, everyone usually was. But these idiots were his priority. "Yeah, what is it, Hyodo? Can't you see we're busy?" One of the third years sneered. But Issei just remained scowling before pointing to the girl. "Yeah, clearly." Taunting and jeering at this girl who is clearly a first year. Plus the fact a bunch of boys older than her and ganging up on her shows just how pathetic you little shits are. "You, boys, give the rest of us males a bad name." He spat back, eyes narrowed while stressing the word boy as a means to show that's how he saw them. "You trying to start a fight here, Hyodo?" one said, stepping up in Issei's face, but he just looked to Kaneko and once again he saw himself in her place. Then she appeared again and seemed to nod her way, missing her widened eyes. Then he looked back at the third year and spoke, his eyes easily piercing into the eyes of the other, who involuntarily flinched from the look in Issei's eyes. "Yes," Issei said before swinging his fist into the third year's nose, easily breaking it, shattering cartilage against his knuckles. "I am," he said before throwing the out-cold third year to the ground. Turning to the other students, he narrowed his eyes and spoke. "Now come and pick on someone your own size, he said, beckoning the rest of the surprised boys. Then their shock turned to anger and they charged mindlessly into their own demise. And thus was a scene neither Yuma nor the silently shocked Kaneko Tuju would ever forget. Against a number of 10 students excluding the one he already knocked out versus only Issei. The Hyodo seemed to just move easily, dodging their attacks with ease. The first punch he slapped away before sending an uppercut to the guy's chin before elbowing him the abdomen. Knocking the wind out of him, Issei followed up with a headbutt, causing the two girls wince when they heard a crack originate from the boy's skull. Issei then leaned back, letting the first one fall with his eyes rolled back as he dodged an attempt to bash his head in with a wooden stick from one of his other attackers. Catching the stick and crushing it in his grip, he pulled it away before backhanding the boy away, fracturing his nose in the process. Throwing the stick away, he spun around, catching a fist aimed for his face, and he glared back into the eyes of his third attack before he clenched his hand on the boy's fist. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" The boy started screaming as Issei clenched the boy's hands until his fingers were turning white. Then with a twitch of his hand he broke the fingers. But before the boy could scream anymore, Issei knocked him off his feet before bringing down his leg on his abdomen, causing him to cough up blood before going unconscious. "Damn you, Hyodo," he heard, but he ducked, dodging another male student's attempt to hit his neck before he spun around, to which he delivered a palm strike to the boy's chest. Letting him stumble back, Issei moved to the left, weaving past another pitiful punch. But he grabbed the offending arm and glanced at the clearly enraged boy before his glare turned cold. Pulling the boy along, he tossed him to the arm. Clenching his arm, he pulled up the student, bent his knee and bent it over his knee. Crack! Ah! The student howled in pain as Issei broke his arm with a quick and simple movement, but then Issei silenced him with a kick to the face. Oh my! This is unreal. He's really going at them. Yuma thought with a wide-eyed expression as she watched the fight. No, this wasn't a fight. It was a grade A slaughter. Turning to the currently recovering student, he simply moved as if he were floating and nailed him with a straight punch to the mouth, dislocating his jaw and sending teeth flying. The boy went out like a light after that and fell upon the others that had fallen at his hands. Then Issei turned to the rest of the boys, blood splattered on his face and eyes as cold as the frigid tundra, and then there was he said, waiting for the now trembling boys who were now staring up at Issei's imposing figure with complete and utter terror. This guy, no, this monster just beat 6 of their friends all at the same time. Ian even went as far as breaking bones. And the Hyodo didn't even seem fazed by it. Monster, one of them uttered, but the comment was easily ignored by Issei, who just kept staring at them with his cold golden hue eyes. Monster! 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 The boys yelled before charging at him, desperation and fear clear in their eyes. But Issei showed no such mercy as they came headlong into a world of pain. Hands at the ready, he diverted to the right, dodging their attempt to get him before he dashed toward them. When they turned around, he brought out both arms and clotheslined 2 of them. Picking them up by his arms, he used the momentum in the air and flipped before slamming both boys into ground, knocking them unconscious. Without missing a beat, he slapped a fist heading towards his face before grabbing the arm and kicking his feet out from underneath him. He threw the offender forward into the school wall, painfully slamming into. He slid down to the ground completely unconscious after that. Finally he turned to see his last offender, who was coming at him with a punch. It was as pitiful as it was sad, and Issei made that clear when he merely slapped the fist away and punched the student in an uppercut, and the impact of his fist made the student stumble back. Then his eyes rolled back and he fell flat on back, completely unconscious. Seeing they were done with, Issei took a breather, deciding it was best to calm himself. When he felt his heart begin to calm down, he turned to the white-haired girl who was staring at him with a great deal of shock in her hazel eyes. "Oi, you alright?" he said, walking toward the girl, who blinked before her eyes fully adjusted to his presence. Issei for a moment could see her shoulders were trembling. Maybe he had went too far on the guys and scared her. But then the strangest thing happened. Her hazel eyes seemed to peer into his light brown ones, and for a moment he swore he felt a strange energy from the girl, yet it dispersed as quick as it came. Then she came up to him and pulled out a handkerchief from her pocket, and Issei was momentarily shocked when she reached up and began wiping the blood off his face. "Ah shit, I was messy. was his idle thought, realizing there was indeed blood on his face. Single quote. Thank you, he heard and blinked when he saw that it was the girl that spoke. Her voice was a tad monotone. But there was gratitude, that much he could tell. Yet was it him, or did he sense a bit of concern as well? Nah, you're welcome, he retorted back, yet he felt a bit taken in by her eyes. For a moment this girl kinda made him think of a cat for some reason. Are you hurt? She asked again, and Issei just sighed and shook his head. Nah, I'm fine, I've been through worse, he said. Which was very true considering his history with school bullies and ignorant teachers. Anyway, you should head on home. Don't want you encountering idiots like them again. Want us to escort you? He suggested, surprising himself at his offer. But the girl just moved her gaze away from him and to Yuma for a moment before shaking her head. No thank you, I will be fine, she said, making Issei nod. Alright, well, guess we'll see ya tomorrow then. Turning away, he was about to walk toward Yuma when he felt someone grip his hand, making him stop in his tracks. He was a bit surprised at the amount of grip the girl had for her body frame. It was surprisingly very deceptive. My name is Kaneko, Tuju Kaneko, she introduced herself, and the Hyodo blinked a few times before turning to her. Seeing Hirable's nervous expression, Issei almost felt a bit bad for going so overboard on those guys. Perhaps he had scared the girl. Hyodo Issei, and over there is Amano Yuma, a friend of mine. Introducing both himself and Yuma, who blinked in the background before she felt Kaneko's gaze on her, which seemed to linger for more than needed. Then the girl looked back at Issei and she nodded. I see, Issei-san, thank you again, she said, bowing her head. Then she walked off while Issei and Yuma watched her leave. Then Yuma looked towards the downed students and she looked at Issei with almost an exasperated expression. Think someone will come get these guys? She suggested, making him look her way with an expressionless face. Maybe, maybe not, I don't care either way, now let's go. And that's all she got before Issei made his way of as well. Yuma just shrugged before following after the Hyodo. She wasn't about to argue with him. After all, the brutal beatdown had been an eye-opener for her as well. It showed that while Issei may seem human, he didn't show the slightest bit of mercy to those that made him angry. Single quote. Kinda endearing in a way. You're making it very hard for me, Issei-san, to follow through with this mission, Yuma thought, watching Issei with a slight smile. Her fallen angel instincts seemed to rage on, either running from this guy, or getting really close to him. None of them noticed, though, a certain distortion in the air on the room before it revealed a familiar woman that had watched the entire scene with a great deal of shock. Sona had just witnessed the new student do something inhuman, taking on 10 people at once without even being scratched once. His movements were smooth and fluid, as if he were dancing around them, and the brutal efficiency that it made her wince a bit. Single quote. Now I know there is something very off about this human, Sona said with narrowed eyes before turning away. She needed time to contemplate and plan on future moves on when or if this boy became something more in the future. Flashback end. And that's how he met Tuju Kaneko, and since then for the past week he was always greeted by the girl at the SCH gates, and on occasion would come to sit with him during lunch. He didn't mind really. While he didn't have friends that went past the number 10, he was always welcoming the girl, which she seemed to be pleased about. Though he did feel a tad of awkwardness when she was around Yuma, but he didn't put much thought into it. He'd come to find out a few things about his new friend. Could he call her a friend? He wasn't sure. Maybe. He didn't know. Either way learned she had a very big sweet tooth, so he took the initiative to buy her something sweet while on the way to the academy. Things from Pocky, chocolate, and gummies among other things. Although he'd come to learn that he was getting a tad close to the girl himself, such as when he first pat her head a few days back when she spoke of the annoying lowly perverts in the area. A good glare scared them off right quick. But to his surprise she didn't seem to mind, so he just shrugged it off as some quirk in the albino-haired first year. However, the consequences of his actions came right back the day after he helped Kaneko, which was why he was currently scowling since then. It seemed word had somehow reached the student body of an incident involving the new student, Hyodo Issei, and a couple of other students. Some began to tarnish his name, but thankfully and confusingly the student council president, whoever that was, stepped in and made sure the truth was brought to light. Whoever he or she was, along with the school board, after viewing the evidence provided by a couple of the president's known sources, had concluded thereafter. All charges placed upon him were dropped and all those boys were expelled from the academy without hesitation, but it didn't erase the rumors about what he did to them from stopping. In fact, they circulated more and more until it became apparent that somehow he'd become in over a week a figure to be known in the academy, feared by the boys that were dumb enough to try the same thing in the females. Oh Kami, the females thought they were bad before, but now, he shook his head, seeing some practically having hearts for eyes and some drooling at the sheer sight of him. This was just getting out of hand. Somehow sensing his annoyance, he felt Kaniko's smaller hand in his own and turned to his kohai only to see a slight worried look in her eyes. "Are you okay, Issei-senpai?" But he just nodded with a small sigh. "Don't worry, I'm fine, just a bit irritated with all this attention," he muttered, missing her worried gaze before she looked away, but he noticed that she hadn't let go of his hand this time. Not really finding it in himself to break away just with Kaniko while giving smoldering glares at any all perverts in the area. It seemed his life at this academy may just be a tad more different than the last. Maybe, hopefully, though he missed the look he was getting from Yuma, who was biting her lower lip in both frustration and nervousness. The deadline was a few days away and she had been holding off on taking Issei out because of a number of reasons. One being because her current leader, Azazel, had explicably told her to just watch over the Hyodo boy and make sure he didn't die. But Kokabeel had come to her and a few other fallen angels and had commanded them under the penalty of death to kill Hyodo Issei. It was death for her if she refused Kokabeel and excommunication by the Grigori if she disobeyed Azazel, but there was more to it than that. As she looked at the Hyodo boy, for all the fear, fright and terror she felt prior to first meeting him, the fear she still felt even now was dulled out by the overwhelming number of good points she found in him. He wasn't a major pervert, which was a plus her book, as it was for almost every female. He held no mercy to those that angered him, which she would admit had left her a bit hot and bothered at the way he handled those boys. Hey, she was a fallen angel for a reason, the whole having impure thoughts and such. His ruthlessness and power, though human, ultimately attracted her. There was also the fact he treated her like a woman and not a piece of meat. She couldn't count how many times she's run into men that just saw women as just that. Maybe she was being a bit ridiculous with that thought, since she was a part of a race that had fallen due to impure thoughts and were in the beginning tempted by human women by having sex with them. But she was born through that unity, and she was quite pleased to see among the mass of perverts that seemed to flood the worlds, she found a male that hated all perversion. Yes, she felt a bit lucky to have found Issei when she did. Call it whatever you wanted, but she was happy, content with this man, even if his aura terrified her at times. Staring at Issei for the longest moment, Yuma, or Rainer in this case, felt her eyes widen in shock once she felt a warmth spread to her cheeks. "Oh, boy," was her thought once she realized what was happening. Rainer, the fallen angel, was blushing. But looking at Issei, her face grew into the smallest of smiles, and for a moment she forgot the worries that plagued her and just basked in this small moment of reprieve. Yes, she'd enjoy this moment with the Hyodo all she could, so it was to Issei's surprise that she came to his other side and took his hand, her own. He looked at her with a raised eyebrow, but she just smiled. Although she could feel the Neko devil hybrid boring holes in her head, she couldn't care less. She was gonna enjoy this for what time she had left. And to hell with both Azazel and Kokabeel, she thought vehemently. After school, Issei was walking away from the academy as usual. School was out for today and he was heading out to leave. Yuma wasn't with him, saying she had to take care of something for her parents, and Kaniko was doing after-school club activities, so he was pretty much on his own. Which, now that he thought about it, was was always with either of the two. Scratching his cheek, Issei just shrugged. Just another change, his slightly different school life, he guessed. But then he saw someone standing at the gates, and he raised an eyebrow when he saw it was a girl around his age with long silky crimson red hair that fell to her hips while a single strand stuck out above her head. Her blue-green eyes were staring back at him with an equal nt of observance, which he just shrugged of. The woman wore the normal Kuo Academy female uniform, which seemed to fit her figure a bit too perfectly. But he sighed. He just kept walking. Hopefully she wouldn't. "Hyodo Issei, may we talk?" Well, shit, there goes that thought, he mentally grumbled before he stopped and turned towards her with a quirked eyebrow. "Yes, can I help you?" he said. The girl just smiled benevolently at him before she walked up toward him, brazenly might he add, before she was just inches apart from him. "Let me introduce myself first, Hyodo-san, since I already know your name," she said before kneeling in a way a princess would, her smile still perfectly in place before she rose back up to his face. "My name is Rias Grimori, third-year student here at Kuo Academy. And also the president of the Occult Research Club. I am here, on behalf of one of my members of said club. She got mixed up in that incident, you may know her as Tuju Kaneko. She said, making his eyes widen a bit before nodding. Yeah, but that's been taken care of and she's all the better for it, he said, but her smile grew before she let out a giggle. That may be, but I'm happy K. Oniko-chan found a reliable senpai in you. She even speaks of you from time to time and she rarely speaks much at all. Rias said, causing him to look at her with slight surprise. Kaneko talked about him. Oh, don't look so surprised. You really helped her out of that situation, which is kinda why I'm here. Here she flushed a bit while scratching her cheek a bit, making his brow quirk up before he looked at her a bit more intensely. Oh, and why's that? He said, not noticing her cheeks darken a bit more from his intense gaze. Well, as her president I felt it was my duty to thank you for saving her from that. But I've just been so busy with club activities and the like that I never had the time to. Which is why I used the free time I had to thank you in person, so let me just say this. Bowing her head, the girl spoke with a grateful tone that spoke of how thankful she really was. I, Rias Grimori, hereby thank you Hyodo Issei for protecting our Kohai. Her tone was so regal and formal that it reminded Issei of a noble of sorts, which made him flush a bit since he wasn't all that into the etiquette status of how nobles were to act. Oi, raise your head, I'm not much into formalities. Just call me Issei and you're welcome. About Kaneko. He grumbled a bit, but then as Rias raised her head he felt a smooth and soft hand caress his cheek, making his eyes go wide before he turned to see Rias peering at him. Into him with eyes full of attentiveness and a slight gleam of something he couldn't discern. Rias-san, he said, feeling his cheeks turn a bit red from her action. But she seemed to just tilt her head before smiling at him. Oh, sorry, I was just admiring the man Kaneko makes you to be, and she clearly wasn't exaggerating. Anyway, I am also here to ask you something, if you will hear me out. She said, although her hand drifted from his face, but his attention was on her at all times now. She just openly touched him and in public, and while it seemed like a simple gesture, he was still put on edge for some reason. And what would that be? Rias just dug her hand into her pocket before pulling out a slip of paper that seemed like a brochure. I am Form RLY inviting you to the Occult Research Club. While I'm sure you're still deciding on what to pick, it is needed to be a part of one to advance to any university. You don't need to decide now, just think about it, K. She said with wink whilst Issei glanced from her to the brochure with both eyebrows raised. We, at the Occult Research Club, delve into all things that are commonly thought to be unreal. Things like mythological creatures, the world of the supernatural, demons, angels, yukai, you name it, we probably go over it. The brochure covers most of what we do, but what I just said is a I see summary, and like I said, don't decide now, take your time. I see. So studying up things like the different religions of the world, such as the Norse, Christian, Shinto, Greek pantheon of gods, the denizens of hell and heaven, and even the yukai of old. Interesting. He said, getting Rias' attention with his words before nodding. Yes, stuff like that, though I'm surprised you know so much already. She asked, causing the Hyodo to rub the back of his head. I've had a lot of interest in all things mythological and supernatural. Yes, it's something that's been with me since I was young. Which was true, since he always was interested in all things supernatural after he found out that he could see the souls of the dearly departed on a daily basis. Rias' eyes seemed to glow in interest. But that may have just been the lighting around them. I see. Well, I'll keep you away no longer then. But remember, if you have questions, just ask Kaneko and or come to the old abandoned schoolhouse. Until then, it was a pleasure to meet you, Hyo Issei-san. She quickly corrected when she saw the twitch in his brow. She was quick to cover her slip of the tongue with a giggle before walking off. Watching her go, Issei once again looked at the brochure and he gave a slight hum before pocketing the parchment, not seeing the slight red glow of a runic circle on the back before it vanished. I should head on home. It is getting rather late. Looking up at the setting sun, he broke into a slight jog as he headed back home. Watching him leave, Rias' smile deepened as another girl, Sona Citri to be exact, came to her side. Was that wise, Rias? To invite a human, no matter how special he seems to be, into the orc. It is after all only a front for your peerage to do your activities here in the human world. She asked her childhood friend. Don't get her wrong, she trusted Rias' judgment on many things, but this was risky, especially for Rias due to her special case. Tilda, you know I don't know myself. But the way Kaneko spoke of him made me curious enough to meet with him myself. And I wasn't disappointed. I could feel that dark cold aura coming of him in waves, and it was igly disturbing so much, in fact I almost broke into a sweat. Yet I could tell he was a truly honest and good man. Am I risking a lot? Yes, perhaps I am, but this man interests me greatly enough so to take that risk. She said, causing Sona's eyes to widen when she caught the meaning her friend's words. Rias, you. The redhead just smiled before walking away. Don't worry too much, Sona, I know that I'm risking a lot. But Issei-san's existence is enough for me to go that far. But I have faith in my Kohai that he will interest me, and perhaps, maybe, just maybe, he'll be my saving grace. She muttered, grasping her chest tightly as Sona looked to Rias with a bit of pity. If only I could help you like the friend I am, yet I can't, and you must take such risks like these. I am deeply sorry, Rias. Sona thought somberly as she watched Rias walk away. Neither of the two know that Rias would get her wish. Only it wouldn't be what they were expecting. Park District. Hyodo Issei sighed a bit. Something he'd been doing a lot lately. But you see, he was going to go on home, but he met up with Yuma on the way and she was exuberantly asking if they could spend time together. They were friends, so he didn't see much point in denying her, which was why he was in the Park District instead at home. Thankfully he messaged his parents that he would be out with a friend and told them he'd be a bit late. After that he'd taken to go out and eat with Yuma for a bit, watch a movie and just relax at the park. And currently he was sitting on a bench, but Yuma now in some casual clothing consisting of a short black dress with a small light purple jacket on top. Currently Issei was seated, but to his slight embarrassment the girl was napping on his shoulder. Yuma, speaking to the girl who just seemed to be in her own little world. She just hummed in response before moving deeper into the crook of his neck. Don't you think it's getting a little late? He said, making her eyes open a tad before looking up at the sky. Indeed, it was night time, possibly around 11 to 12 right about now. But the girl surprised him when she wrapped her arms around him and snuggled deeper, causing his cheeks to flush darker. We can always sleep here, you know. Clearly she wasn't in the right state of mind to say that, or so he thought. He wasn't sure if she was serious about that or not, but just chose the latter. Still, he sighed and looked up at the stars, and a rare smile of his own made itself apparent on his face. He could see them fully and clearly. All the stars twinkling up in the sky above them. A secret quirk of his, but the space and all it represented, just looking up at it soothed him even on his darkest days. Didn't know why, it just did. Well, I guess it isn't so bad, he mumbled to himself, but Yuma heard him and her cheeks flushed a bit at his words. This was good, a moment she'd remember for as long as she lived. But then all good things had to come to an end. What do we have here? A voice, a very familiar voice, sounded in the area. The sound of it was like poison to Yuma's ears. Her eyes snapped open in panic before she got up to see, to her utter terror, a single man coming up to them. Oh no. 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 The fallen angel in disguise thought in frantic peril as she beheld the sight of the man. He was tall, about his height, and he had the appearance of a young man with long black hair. He had an almost unhealthy pale complexion, pointy elf-like ears and cruel red eyes. He was dressed in an ornamental black robe with detailed accessories. His smirk made Yuma physically ill, but it was Issei who narrowed his eyes on the man and stood up alongside Yuma. Oi, what do you want? Issei asked quite rudely, since for some unknown reason he didn't like this guy's tone. But the man just seemed to find it amusing, while Yuma was desperately wanting to scream at Issei to run. Oh, you still live? I thought I ordered you to die, but it seems Rainer here seems to have had a change of heart. Disgusting ingrate, he spat at Yuma, who flinched at his voice. Issei on the off, our hand narrowed his eyes on the man and stepped forward. I don't quite like your tone nor how you're speaking to my friend. Now start talking sense, he said, causing the man's smirk to grow in a cruel fashion. A human, someone vastly inferior to someone such as myself, dare speak to me in such a manner. Amusing. But clearly you don't understand the situation you're in. Have you not told him that your job was to kill him, Rainer? He hissed, causing Issei to frown before he looked to Yuma, who seemed to react at the word Rainer. And what was this about an order to kill him? Yuma, he asked, only to see Yuma tear her gaze to the ground. Issei, I am sorry, I didn't mean to lie to you, she shook her head and looked toward the man with a determined expressio. And although she was trembling in absolute fright, "No, it doesn't matter anymore. I won't do it. I will not kill him. No matter what you say, Kokobile." She screamed at the man, Kokobile his name, was who just scowled in rage while Issei's eyes widened in shock. "Kill me, but why?" He was shaken from his thought though when Yuma's face appeared in front of him and he saw her shaking him. "Issei, run, run, run now." He was pushed before he watched in shock as her back rippled before two wings of ebony grew out from her back. He watched as she formed a spear of pure golden light in H. And as she stood defiantly in front of him. "Oh, you intend to fight me? Over this human? Oh my, that cannot do. You've fallen for this mortal. How disgusting, but worry not, I will have you two pieces of trash die together." Kokobile smirked before 5 pairs of black angel ripped out of his back, easily outnumbering Rainer's own before he reached out with his hand. Then a spear of golden light formed in hand. Holy light thrummed powerful at his fingertips as the spear doubled in size and tripled in deadliness. For Issei, as he watched his completely shocking scene unfold before him, he felt his heart begin to race as he saw the sight of what looked like angels before him. Wielding spears of holy light, thought only as a myth, was now before his very eyes. Was he dreaming? Was he still on the bench with Yuma? Yes, that had to be it. His mind refused to believe anything else. So shocked at the illogical scene before, he never saw the fallen angels move before he heard Yuma's voice again. "Issei, Ru, quiet wench." Blood, crimson liquid of all life splattered across his face, which woke him from his stupor only to see a sight that made his eyes widen. It was Yuma in front of him. RMS reached to her sides, a spear of holy light piercing through her heart. She was there in front of him, standing there, not trying to kill him as the man said. No, she was protecting him. "Why, Yuma?" Her blood splattered across his face and he reached up with shaky hands. "Issei, I'm sorry," was all she could say before Kokobile cruelly wrenched out the spear before throwing her to the side. Her bleeding limp body made the Hyodo watch in morbid confusion. This had to be a joke. Yeah, a joke, yeah. "Now your turn, kid," he heard, but Issei was far too numb to the world. He saw the light. The life in Yuma's eyes dim. The life of his second true friend began to die in front of him. Useless, helpless to do anything. Yuma. Then pain settled in as a spear of holy light pierced through his heart as well. "Ahaha, and that's how you take care of such trash," Kokobile commented, never realizing what he had just done. Of what he had just unleashed. Issei's eyes, his dull light brown orbs started to smolder as he looked upon the dying body of his second friend. Seeing her blood flow, her dying gasps for air only to cough up more blood. Yuma, or Rainer, whatever her name was. His friend was dying before his eyes. His eyes started to flicker, they began to light up with a divine glaze, the intensity grew and grew until a deep flickering ember of rage began to grow. And even deeper inside his very soul, something far darker, far more cold, something celestial even, had awoken. Inside his pocket the brochure Rias gave him flashed crimson. You bastard." Issei's inhuman shout turned into a scream as his voice turned right guttural and deeper. His eyes blazed to life, his light brown eyes burned away, and in their place a pair of smoldering golden red eyes that roared with an unholy feeling of pure despair and death for all things. He crushed the spear and stood up as his body to leak off tendrils of different energies. Some being purple, green, red, white, and blue. But then these energies began to swirl around Issei before they all converged, and a blazing aura of pure jet black energy of the foulest and coldest nature engulfed his being. What is this? I killed you," Kokobile shouted in irritation and the slightest bit of concern. Issei ignored him as the black aura consumed him, engulfed his entire body and soul. And then he raised his head through the flaming ebony energy that blazed around his form, as if he were wrapped in a black mantle of the blackest of energy. It conformed around him as if welcoming back a long-lost lover. It swirled around his very being as if it were a second skin. And his golden, red eyes glared with all the hatred and rage Issei had pent up within him. And he let it all out. Raj, Kokobile was a man known throughout the 3 realms as an entity of legend. A lead organization, Grigori. He was one of the very few fallen angels that survived the Great War long ago in ancient times. He prided himself on having fought and survived in battles against beings of legend such as the original Satans and even the biblical God himself. He bore witness to many things and the strangest happenings in all the world. It led to him developing a mindset that made him see all races were beneath his own, the fallen angels. Devils, yokai, human and even the likes of their former race the angels. His pride did not allow him to think otherwise, which led to why he was heavily opposed by both Azazel and Shemhazai, the other two Grigori leaders, about continuing the war so long ago. In order to rebuild their forces, though, Azazel and Shemhazai agreed the only way to recover was through a number of means. 1. To mate with their race to repopulate the fallen angels, or to his disgust mate with humans. 2. Was search for particular humans out in the world, ones who could be sensed to be holding a sacred gear in them, and should they prove to be potentially usable, then they would be invited to the Grigori. And Kokobil despised every second of that plan, and each time a human was brought into the organization, he was livid about the entire thing. It's why when he found out about a particular target of interest that Azazel had been keeping tabs on, he decided to check out what it was. And he was enraged to find out that it was yet another disgusting mortal with possibly an incredibly powerful sacred gear buried deep within him. The sheer thought of another human joining the Grigori ranks, one that wielded power, disgusted him beyond reason. It's why he had Aproa Ched, the ones Azazel charged with watching over the human, and ordered them to either kill the boy or he would in turn kill them himself. He'd given them a deadline as to how long they had before he intervened. But his patience grew thin when he felt the boy was still alive after he clearly wanted the little maggot dead. It's why he came earlier than expected, leaving completely under the radar of both Azazel and Shemhazai, and came to this cesspool that was a mortal dwelling and tracked the brat down himself. Disguising his presence was easy enough. It would be no good to alert the devils of his presence until it was time. After all, he had more important plans ahead of him, and killing this human mortal would be quick and simple, right? That's how he thought it would be like as he hunted down the little rat, only to come to find out one of the fallen angels, Rainer, was with the mortal. Yet, she wasn't killing him. Oh no, she was being with the worm. He'd followed the two, keeping tabs, and saw that she had no intention of killing him. Because the damn wench had clearly changed her mind, a change of heart if you will. It was clear to him, very clear in fact, that Rainer had grown a soft spot for this mortal. No, it wasn't that. Her eyes spoke of it very well. One of his own kin, a fallen angel, had fallen for this mortal boy. The disgust that grew within him was as strong as the will to kill the bitch. Which is why he waited for the right moment to kill them both, a sort of mercy. He proposed to kill both of them so they could die together. Who said he wasn't the least bit merciful? Or that's how he thought it would happen. Kill Rainer and then kill the human worm. But it seemed his plan had been undermined by one simple thing. The human was still alive. No, thought Kokobil as he watched a few feet away, eyes glued on the mortal who was supposed to have died. This boy clearly was no longer human due to the fact of what was happening to him, and yet his mind raced as to or exactly why the boy was even present in a physical body. He'd put enough holy energy in that spear to vaporize the human body in seconds. So why was this boy still alive? How? I know I killed you. How did you come back to life? Kokobil spat in annoyance, but the boy remained unresponsive, hunched over with a mass of the most pitch dark of energy which swirled around his body. The boy was clutching onto his head, daring to glare at him with such eyes. Eyes that bled with such unholy hatred, a mix of gold and red that seemed to go right through his body and grip his very soul. TCH, no matter, I will kill you before you can unleash whatever is inside you. The fallen angel spoke before raising a hand, and this time he generated an even stronger spear of light that was 4 times his own size. Packed with enough power that would surely wipe out this boy's body in an instant. As he readied to hurl the spear, his sick twisted yellow eyes narrowed once he saw the boy's energy became more and more erratic by the second. Die. Throwing the spear, he watched with a smirk as the spear sailed toward the boy, who just kept glaring at him, defiantly, even in the face of his inevitable demise. For a moment, Kokobil felt his skin crawl from the look of those eyes, so filled with hatred and rage the likes of which even he could not fathom. Even as his demise approached, the boy had ch spirit to openly defy one who was so vastly superior. It made him sick, which made it all the more enjoyable as the spear fast approached the boy. Surely, this time in his mind the boy would die in. Whatever that was trying to awaken within him would die alongside him. Yes, surely. Alas, that was not to be. The spear crackling with holy energy, enough so to wipe out a quarter of the city. The why were impacted with the boy, and yet the most inconceivable thing happened. The spear stopped upon impact with the boy, and it was then absorbed by the encroaching dark power that seemed to come alive around the boy. Kokobil, upon seeing such a thing, made his eyes widen in alarm, his concern growing more intense as he saw his own spear of light be absorbed as if it were nothing. What, in the name of? Kokubile started to utter, only he was stopped in mid-sentence when Issei's glare pierced through the darkened veil that was swallowing up his body. His eyes stayed on Kokubile, freezing the man on the spot. The boy slowly let go of his head, gnashed his teeth, and as the ebony aura around the boy conformed around him, all seemed to go silent as the effects of the energy took hold. His clothing slowly reduced to nothingness in the wake of this energy, revealing much of his body. Surrounding him in a mantle of the purest obsidian, it shifted as if it had a will of its own. His entire body became a misty black cloak. It went up, covering his body like a second skin, shadowing his flesh from the world. Yet it stopped up to his neck, but the changes didn't stop there, for the Hyodo's light brown hair blackened, changing to a shade of raven which felt as if it would suck in all light within all of reality itself. It also grew until it went past his neckline and went to his shoulders. Without noticing it, the brochure given to him by Rias flowed from his body from the winds, and it pulsed red as Issei underwent his change. But it was when the boy began growling at Kokubile that the very much shocked fallen angel watched in morbid terror as a pure white substance, the shade of bone, began to appear on the boy's face. It grew and molded itself as if it had a will of its own, and very soon the white substance solidified onto the boy's face, covering his forehead, eyes, nose and mouth. Yet the most terrifying thing of all was that the supposed mask was shaped like that of a frontal piece to a skull. Issei, was the fleeting thought of Yuma Rainer as she watched with dimming eyes what was becoming of the man she had given her life for. Soon enough all life and her eyes faded, with the last sight she saw being Issei. One tear dropped from her eyes before life left her body. What is this? Kokubile stuttered, taking a step back as the boy began to let out, if it were possible, even darker energy. The area around him seemed to die, the ground turned ash gray, and all life and the light in the world seemed to just be sucked in by the encroaching darkness of this single boy. Of this single entity before Auto Issei screamed, his voice no longer his own, drowned out, becoming deeper and more hollow than anything else. Rag, and in that moment Kokubile's vision went black. The earth, the galaxy, the universe itself rippled as a being long thought gone emerged once more. The very fabric of reality was torn asunder and molded back as the area Issei once stood erupted into a pitch-black pillar of energy which pierced the sky, causing the very Earth's sky from all around the globe to turn pitch black. The darkness encroached the planet, hiding the twinkling stars, and soon the planet Earth was covered in a veil of pitch blackness. It was then that all of creation shuddered in the wake of this emergence. Same time heaven. It happened, far too fast for anyone to realize what was happening. The White City, heavenly kingdom of God, trembled as the golden skies above them flickered to a blackness that seemed to encroach upon all of creation. Their heavenly realm trembled and rumbled as if some godly force was threatening to rip apart their very dimension. A few unlucky angels near the darkness were quickly killed before anything could save them. Their bodies shriveled up as all life and divine blessings within them were sucked out. The angels affected soon turned to dust in the wind. Michael, seraph and archangel, acting God of heaven, narrowed his eyes in alarm and the smallest spark of fear. He was a young, handsome-looking man with blonde hair and green eyes, dressed in a white robe with detailed accessories. He stood up from the golden throne and looked out and saw what was happening to his realm. This energy. Gabriel, a fellow seraph, and his sister spoke, the most beautiful and strongest woman in heaven. With a voluptuous figure, long burly blonde hair and deep azure blue eyes, she stood at his side in golden-plated armor that didn't seem to be able to hide her figure. I know, Gabriel, I feel it too. For some reason, the entity that felled so many souls in the Great War has returned. He spoke with a rare moment of anger in his voice. The nigh omnipotent presence that had ripped apart the very soul of his father. The thing that haunted the very hearts and souls all of things, was making its appearance once again after so many millennia. The words escaped him, the name that haunted his every waking nightmare to this day. It came out in the softest whisper, death. Gabriel felt a cold shiver go down her spine once those words left Michael's lips. Same time hell. The devils and demons were in a state of panic. The underworld that was their dwelling, their home, could not have been prepared for what had come. The very sky was ripped asunder, the ground all across the edges of the underworld trembled as the very fabric of reality which held the realm together was affected by the awakening. Long-slept volcanoes erupted all over the underworld, long-sleeping demons were awoken. by the catastrophe that was happening to their realm. Devils and demons alike were undiscriminated as their once purple sky began to blacken. All light within the underworld was snuffed out in an insta. Nt as a darkness most unholy seethed upon all that was the underworld. Creeping along the land like a plague, and the most unfortunate to be taken by the darkness were sucked into the ebony veil that seemed to invade their realm. Countless beings inside the realm could feel it. The 72-pillar noble devil clans could feel the shuddering power engulfing the realm. The 4 great Satans were as moved if not more so by this darkness. Falbium Asmodeus, one of the 4 Maus, stood in shock as the power washed over his being, threatening to rip out his soul if he so much as moved an inch. Such an overwhelming presence. He strained out in clenched teeth. Ajuka Beelzebub, another Maus Satan and one of the 2 super devils, within his territory, opened both eyes in a rare moment of shock before. He struggled to keep himself from falling to the floor. Single quote ellipsis dot. This power, I can feel it. Yes, things will finally get interesting now, the Satan said with a slight manic gleam in his eye. Seraphal Leviathan, another Maus Satan, and older sister to Sona Citri, stopped her current business in her territory and looked up at the sky. Her exuberant azure blue eyes narrowed in alarm once she felt the energy threatened to flood all of the underworld. Her mind was in panic because this energy was originating from somewhere else. Earth. Sona Chan, dropping everything, Seraphal conjured a transportation circle to attempt to reach Earth, but she was forced back as the circle erupted into a field of black lightning which shocked her. This made her eyes widen as even the dimensional gap wasn't allowing travel between worlds. Backing away, Seraphal had to wonder, what held so much power to affect the realms and even the underworld like this? As deathly worried as she was for her little sister, her devil instincts were demanding 2 things from her at that moment. Run and flee from this energy as fast as possible, but the second was whispering into her ear, speaking in a seductive tone to seek out the one releasing such power. Sears X Lucifer, last of the 4 Maus Satans and the other super devil, stood alongside his wife Graphia. His blue-green eyes were narrow in concern and worry as he watched his attempted transportation circle short erupt into a strange field of black lightning. He'd felt the imbalance of the underworld the moment hell itself shuddered. And he was currently very worried for his dear little sister, Rias Grimori, who was stationed on Earth. The realm where he could just feel the energy was originating from. Damn it, what's happening? He said while he and Graphia stood there helpless to do anything as their attempt to reach Earth and ensure Rias' safety was denied. Sears X, this energy, it's not normal, it almost feels like. His wife and mother of his child spoke in a soft manner and the red-haired man nodded in confirmation. Yes, it feels just like back then, this soul-numbing coldness, it's the same as back in the Great War. And that's exactly why I'm terrified for Ria's safety. He started trembling and his eyes started flashing blood red, just showing how stressed the man was. He could feel it, whatever was happening. It was affecting everything he's ever known up until now. What was happening? But the devils were not the only ones affected by this apocalyptic phenomenon. In fallen angel Tay Rittery, they too were being affected by the deathly presence washing over the realm. None more so than those at the Grigori HQ, as many of the fallen angels were running around in panic. One man stood watching from the roof. His fists were clenched and his eyes were narrowed in a fury that was so unlike him. He had the appearance of a man in his 20s with black hair with gold bangs in the front, and black facial hair. This man was none other than Azazel, Governor General of the Grigori organization and fallen angel race. His fists trembled with blood beginning to leak out from his fists. Kokabeel, what have you done, you fool? The usually laid-back man roared at the black night sky as he felt the underworld's very stability start to shudder. Staring at Azazel's back, another man with a young handsome appearance. He had dark silver hair with light blue eyes that soon turned to the horizon and they narrowed when he saw the encroaching darkness. The man fought back a shiver as well. It was a natural fear that he felt that he was sure everyone in the entire realm of the underworld could feel. He wasn't arrogant to admit he wasn't the least bit frightened because he was, but the smirk that crossed his face showed just how equally he excited was. Is it you that I feel, my rival? It has to be, it must be, he thought, his mind refused to believe it were anyone else. For he knew deep down that this was the awakening of his rival and the slight thrum of Albion, who was lay within his soul confirmed it. Same time dimensional gap worlds, Earth, Heaven and Hell. No matter where, You looked, all you saw in each direction was a mix of iridescent colors that shifted and morphed in various ways that made it all the more unique. However, since it was the in-between dimension of all the three realms, it was the most affected out of them all. Some would believe nothing could affect a world that held nothingness, but they would be proven incredibly wrong if they saw what was happening. The once iridescent colors were being engulfed by darker shades of purple and green, while a veil of ebony seemed to sweep through the void, taking in all light in the area in its endless and limitless grasp. The floating golems left by the ancient gods were crumbling away into dust, and even the very space of the void was being torn apart yet molded back just as quick. This presence, however, as affecting the only two entities that lived within the dimensional gap, the first of which was flying through the void, but as of now it was doing its best to avoid the near countless rips in the space of the void. This entity was a massive red western dragon with a horn on its snout. This was the true red dragon emperor god, the dragon of dragons, the apocalypse dragon, Great Red. And currently the almighty dragon, legendary in all things, was cursing like a sailor. What in the name of hell is going on? I take one moment to rest. One bloody fucking moment and someone dares to interrupt my nap. The dragon's voice boomed across the void as it swirled past another rip which sealed itself back up. Yes, Great Red was cranky. He decided to take a rare moment to rest, only to end up nearly pulled in by a rip in the dimensional gap, and he had to hurry and start flying all over the void to avoid being sucked in by these rips. It wouldn't bode well if he were pulled in by them. Oh no, it would not bode well at all. This was the first time Great Red had ever seen the dimensional gap react like this. It was as if it were collapsing in on itself from whatever had unleashed that power spike. And that damned power spike. It was like the dragon was hit with a jackhammer 3 times its size, jolting him awake in alarm. That wasn't even mentioning the feeling it felt when its own soul felt numb, as if someone or something was grasping it in a cold steel-like grip. So yeah, for the first time, Great Red was in a panic. Its eyes widened though when it saw an even bigger rip appear in front of it, and he was moving too fast to dodge. Shit. But then the most unexpected thing happened. The power disappeared, without a trace, causing all things it was affecting all across the 3 realms and in the dimensional gap to cease. The iridescent colors were slowly returning to normal and the endless void was repairing itself, but it caused Great Red to balk as all the rips repaired themselves. Blinking in surprise, the great dragon felt a bead of sweat fall from its face as that enormous power seemed to just drop completely off the radar. What in the name of creation just happened? Looking up, Great Red narrowed its eyes once it felt its passenger stop all movement. She hadn't said a single word since this whole damn thing started. Oi, Ophis, you've been really quiet up there, it said, addressing the second entity that used the dimensional gap as its home. One older than even itself, actually. Up on Great Red's back stood a single female figure who seemed to be looking in a single direction within the endless void. The female had the appearance of a young girl with long black hair and gray eyes that were smoldering with seemingly a rare moment of surprise or shock. Her pointed ears twitched, perking up as if she heard something else no one else could. She was dressed in a gothic Lolita fashion, a sharp contrast to who this being was. For this was Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, the infinite dragon god. Despite her appearance, no one could dispute her level of power and everyone feared her very name, and rightfully so. She had been there since the dawn of time. Older than any of the other gods. In comparison to her, the other pantheons seemed like newborn children. Her power was vast and extremely extensive, and yet she knew deep down that was not the case. As Ophis looked in a single direction, she pulled up her hand and ignored the rambling of the big buffoon below her. And what she saw brought a very rare smile to her face, atop her right hand burn. A symbol she'd never thought she would ever see again. A symbol that made her existence feel hopeful again, a bright ray of hope that she would be able to mend her mistake she made so long ago. The mistake of leaving the one who made her feel truly complete. This symbol burned a dark purple with a blackish hue, in the shape of a horizontal 8, the symbolic representation of this single seal maw. Did her smile brighten in such a manner one wouldn't think it belonged on the normally stoic Ophis. But no one could understand what she felt, no one in creation could even begin to comprehend it. What she felt transcended the bonds of family and even that of lovers. This was a matter of being, the troubles of the soul, of a sentient being desperate to fulfill her existence. With her symbol, infinity, glowing with intensity, she looked, as if peering through the dimension itself, and soon words left her lips, quiet yet solemn, graceful yet sad. Eternity, you have returned. Yet, Something's different about you. Have you achieved a material body like myself? No, it's different. I'm coming to see you, Eternity. Ophis spoke, putting up a rare expression of determination. Oi Ophis, what are you mumbling about up there? Great Red bellowed, but Ophis ignored him entirely as she snapped her fingers and opened a portal which she soon stepped through, leaving behind the bit shaken Great Red to fly around the dimensional gap. Wondering just what the hell happened. Same time Earth. Silence. That's how the planet Earth was. All around the globe everything had fallen deathly silent. Those that had seen the phenomenon were frozen terror and others in a state of morbid awe. The rest were fast asleep, completely unaware of what just transpired above their heads. But centered where the pillar of darkness originated from, near the grounds of Kuo Academy, a gathering of devils stood within the old schoolhouse a bit aways from the academy itself. It was the gathered peerage of Rias G. Rimori, who was stationed all around the meeting room. Rias sat at her desk rubbing her forehead, trying in vain to ease her rattled nerves. Akeno is always at her side, but her usual smile was gone and trouble's look was clear in her eyes. Kiba, the blonde-haired prince of Kuo Academy, sat on the couch trying to find a way to keep himself busy. But his whole body was a trembling mess, he couldn't even keep his hands from shaking. They had all been nearly crushed to death by a power spike that originated not too far from the academy, a few miles at best. It lasted for a good whole minute or two until it eventually stopped. But the anxiety and fear they felt was still fresh in their mind. But Kaneko, the one sitting at the window staring out in a direction, who had recovered first and was just staring out at a random location. Her eyes seemingly fixated on something the others couldn't see. Bushu, what should we do? Akeno said, causing Rias to sigh. In all honesty, Rias was still sweating. Due to the spike of power she felt just minutes ago. It was an energy she knew all too well. It was the very same essence as Issei's, but the logical part of her mind was denying that Issei, no matter how strong, could have had a sacred gear that strong that could cause something like this. However, the other side, the hopeful part, was telling her that was the Hyodo boy that had caused this. Which also meant he had been killed, meaning the spell she had used had actually worked. I don't know, Akeno. Sona and her peerage are working tirelessly to repair the damage around the city and re-establish connection with the underworld. For us, I just don't know. This was the first Rias had ever fear life. Her body refused to even remove itself from the seat, no matter how dire the situation was outside. She knew why it was. It was because she was afraid, deathly afraid of whatever had just been unleashed. At first she thought Issei had some sort of powerful sacred gear, but when she felt his life go out, she felt something change, something abnormal happened. The forbidden spell she put on the brochure she gave him had worked, that much she was certain, but beyond that everything just went beyond her comprehension. I knew he would be too powerful for any pieces, even all the 8 pawn pieces couldn't match up to the value of what he had. That much was evident enough from the amount of power he was giving off. She thought, which was one of the reasons why her interest in the Hyodo had been so great, yet it is also why she had decided to make a risky move. Since she knew reincarnating Issei when he died wouldn't be possible, she had utilized a forbidden spell that was locked away in her family's library. It was a dark art spell that would resurrect the life of the one in contact of the spell. But the cost at times was said to usually backfire on the target and kill the user, which thankfully enough it didn't happen. She'd taken the risk of just bringing him back to life after he died, just to see what he would become, using a spell that was strictly forbidden by her family. And now she was wondering if it was worth it, since she just couldn't feel Issei's presence at all now. But then something happened. A flash of red caught her and her peerage's attention, and she turned to see, to her shock, a red runic circle, the very same design she had inscribed on the brochure. She gave to Issei form in the middle of the room. It glowed, showing that it was ready for the transport, a spell she put on in case it was needed to arrive at his location so she could help fend off those that attacked him. This can't be. How is this here? He's dead, isn't he? Rias said, only for Kaneko to speak up. Issei-senpai needs help. Bushu, she looked at her kohai only to see a forlorn expression on the girl's face. Biting her lower lip, Rias turned her gaze from Kaneko's hazel eyes and back to the circle. Maybe he had survived. Kaneko, after all, was sensitive to all forms of life around her, so maybe she could sense his life force somewhere out there. Looking back at Kaneko, Rias sighed before giving a small smile, so she fought against her trembling body and stood up. Very well. Kaneko, you will come with me and we'll see if we can find Issei-san. Akeno, Kiba, I want you to remain here in case Sona re-establishes connection the underworld that way. In case my brother arrives, you can keep him here until I return. The Grimoire princess ordered her queen and knight, who nodded. Hi Bushu. Pleasantly smiling at the two, she and Kaneko walked toward the Re-D circle and stood in the middle, neither of the two not knowing what would happen once they arrived at the location. As the circle's transportation magic began to work, Kaneko looked in the direction S. He felt Issei's presence and she frowned sadly. Issei senpai is in pawn. Then the two disappeared in a flash of red light. Same time, Park District. Kokobile prided himself on being a man that wasn't afraid of anything. What with having faced the biblical god, the four original Maozen came out as a survivor of the Great War. He would have figured that he had seen everything that could have put the fear into him. However, as he floated a few feet above the epicenter of where he had lost his vision for an instant, he was proven very wrong. For he was feeling fear, and not just normal fear, a primal fear that surged from the very soul. You are not human. What are you? Spat the fallen angel. His usual pale complexion was deathly white. Sweating uncontrollably, he tried in vain to ease his body. But it was shaking too much for him to even do anything besides flying, and even that was proving difficult. Kokobile's red eyes stayed directly on the one who he had once thought was a mere mortal. But that was thrown to the wind once he experienced minutes prior. This was no longer a human, nay, this thing was something else entirely. This wasn't a demon, not a devil, not an angel, and not even an abomination. It was just something else. Standing at the epicenter, the changed Hyodo Issei stood, motionless with his head held down. His long black bangs shadowed his face as he stood tall, imposing and utterly terrifying to Kokobile. His cloak, made up of solely darkness, stuck to him like a second skin, the bottom seemingly burning into tatters yet reforming back. The area around him was turned gray. The grass had died, the bench he and Yuma once sat on just relaxing in each other's presence rotted away. Yet the strangest thing was that Yuma's cold corpse hadn't been affected at all by the release of Issei's power. No, her body was in fact glowing with a dark greenish glow with a blackish hue. Issei seemingly ignored Kokobile's presence entirely at this point, raised his head, allowing his black locks to part way, revealing the pristine bone-white mask covering most of his face. His smoldering golden red orbs saw only one thing as his priority. He turned almost robotic, allied towards Yuma's body, and moved to her, catching the attention of Kokobile, but the fallen angel remained silent. He wished to make a snark remark, but something was staying his tongue, as if Samet Hing was clecking his very soul, and it threatened to end his life with a simple gesture if he so much as spoke a word. Besides, what can he do now? The wench is dead, her soul is gone to the underworld. Doomed to be tormented until the end of time, he thought with small satisfaction, and it was at that moment, as Issei made his way to Yuma's cooling corpse, that a flash of red light caught Kokobile's attention, and yet it was ignored by Issei. Appearing not a few feet away by the Hyodo, two figures appeared from a red transportation circle, as they were assimilated from red particles of demonic energy. Kokobile took the time mask his presence for the moment. His eyes glancing from the circle and sensing the two's energy not worth his time, he turned back at the Hyodo, awaiting for the opportune time to strike. Soon enough the figures of both Rias Grimoire and Tuju Kaneko formed, and once they were fully aware of their surroundings, they were not prepared for what awaited them. They looked up at the sky to see a swirling mass of gray and black clouds, all slowly spinning like a giant maelstrom up in the air. Bolts of black lightning rumbled, and looking around them they saw the area made to have been sucked of all life, leaving everything just a shade of ash gray. But then she and Kaneko saw someone amidst this desolate land, walking steadily towards a downed female figure. It was only when their eyes focused enough that Rias heard her rook, Kaneko, speak. Issei senpai, Kaneko said, causing the Grimoire princess's eyes to widen in unadulterated shock. Issei. That was Issei. She didn't feel anything from him now like she usually did. She didn't sense an ounce of his usually leaking dark aura. Hell, Rias couldn't even sense a spark of energy from him now. He was just there, existing. How do you know it's Issei, Kaneko? She said, but the girl remained unresponsive before she started walking toward the figure that was Issei, and being a tad hesitant herself, Rias followed in suit. It was only when they got closer that they were able to discern Issei's appearance. And if Kaneko hadn't been entirely sure that it was him, then they would have thought this to be a total stranger. His 6'0" figure was as imposing as it was foreboding, garbed only in a billowing obsidian cloak that seemed to burn into tatters and reform endlessly. Reaching up to his neck, it seemed to just shift around his body as if it had a will of its own. His once light brown hair was now pitch black and was long and straight, reaching past his neckline and to his shoulder. Blades. The two girls were only able to see his backside. They moved on toward the down figure, which they soon found it to be that Yuma girl that was always with him. The fallen angel that was observing him. It seems as if she was pierced through the heart. But looking at the scene, it doesn't seem like there was a struggle. What killed her? Yuma-san, she heard Kaneko speak with a rare moment of solemnness. Ah yes, that's right, she had hung around Issei, who was with Yuma most of the time. Kaneko must have befriended the fallen angel to some degree. The two girls stopped as Issei came to Yuma's cold corpse. His head down, looking down at her lifeless eyes. Then he kneeled on one leg and reached out to her, dipping his hand under her neck and in a slow yet gentle motion. As if Issei was handling something extremely fragile. He lifted her head up, causing her black hair to part way, revealing her lifeless violet eyes that stared up at nothing, and behind his mask Issei's golden red eyes closed for a moment, his mask hiding his face from the world. Single quote ellipsis dot. Yuma. The change in his voice startled the two girls. The deep guttural sound it made caused them to shiver on the spot. Rias may not have been able to feel a thing from Issei now, but she sure felt something from his voice, and that something made her body tremble in coldness. They watched as his other hand aim up to her face, pushing her black locks behind her ear and seemed to caress her cheek. But soon enough Kaneko fought down her hesitation and came closer to Issei's kneeled form, and Rias, alarmed for the safety of her rook and mentality of Issei, followed as well. Kaneko came to Yuma's other side and slowly kneeled down as Rias kneeled beside her. Issei-senpai, Kaneko spoke monotonously, but the sadness was evident in her voice. However, Issei seemed to hear her, and the two were welcomed to a sight that made their souls cry out in terror. They couldn't see Issei's face besides his cheeks, for it was mostly covered by a pristine bone-white mask resembling the frontal piece of a skull. Similar to that of an executioner's mask in some aspect. And staring through the bone-white eye holes was a pair of golden red eyes that truly revealed that something in the Issei they knew had changed. Something had awoken in him, something far more unholy than anything Rias could ever think in the deepest parts of her nightmares. It was the same for Kaneko, who was kneeled, frozen in place as those eyes peered at her. These eyes terrified her more than that of the rampage she saw of her older sister. Kuroka, who went made with power so long ago. What happened to you, senpai? The albino-haired girl stuttered out, and the masked man tilted his head at her before he cast his gaze to Rias. For a moment he held her eyes, staring through her blue-green eyes, laying her soul bare before his golden red smoldering orbs. Then he just looked back down at Yuma, leaving Kaneko's question unanswered. And as if instinct urged him, he raised his free hand from Yuma's cheek and brought up his palm. And to their amazement and slight apprehension, his hand was engulfed in an aura of purple and black. It soon began to solidify into a small wispy sphere that was the size of a softball. Is that? It can't be. Rias soon realized it when she saw the wispy sphere conform in Issei's hand, who gently brought it down to Yuma's dead corpse. The slight whispers and echoing cry originating from the sphere was all Rias needed to know to realize what it was. It was a soul, and not just any soul, it was this fallen angel's soul. What kind of power do you have to pluck a soul from the depths of the underworld, and from the governing watch of Hades himself? Issei, what have you become? As thought, watching in fascination as Issei did the seemingly impossible before her in Kaneko's eyes. He brought the sphere down and let it sink into Yuma's body, and as it did he brought his hand up to her wound, and his palm glowed a light green hue before letting the greenish energy reach out to her fatal wound, which it was soon healed in seconds. Heart regenerating back, flesh and torn tissue sticking back as if nothing had happened. When that was finished, Rias and Kaneko watched in shock as Yuma's pulse returned. Her chest began to move up and the slight thrumming beat of her heart show. Her heart was back and healthy as ever. Rias and Kaneko looked up from Yuma to Issei's silent form in total shock at this point. They had just witnessed Issei pull the impossible. Healing something near death was good, but what he just did was on a whole other level. He just resurrected the dead, pulled the soul of one lost to the underworld controlled by Hades, and brought her back to life. Amazing, the words left her lips. The Grimoire princess's eyes bespoke of the amazement she felt, and for a moment as Issei laid Yuma's head back down and stood back up. For a single moment, Rias felt as if she were staring up at the presence of something beyond the trivial comprehension of sacred gear. She felt as if she were staring up into the face of a deity, of a true god. But then, why resurrect the one who killed you? Unless, I knew it, you are a monster. Kokobil's voice sounded alerting both Rias and Kaneko, who looked up to see Kokobil appearing from a distortion spell that hid his presence. Their eyes went wide in alarm at seeing such a figure of legend just a few feet above them. But to him, his eyes simply passed them by and were trained solely on Issei with a great deal of alarm and rage in his yellow eyes. Kokobil, one of the 3 leaders of the Grigori. Why are you here? This was bad, very very bad, someone like him was here. Already Rias cool. Tell the situation was already extremely terrible if this man was here. She knew without a doubt there wasn't anyone near them in the city that could take on Kokobil, and the one that could on equal ground were her brother and the other Maos. After all, this man survived battle against God himself and even fought against the original Satans. This man was not to be trifled with, and yet question pegged her. Why was one with such status here? For your information, sister of Lucifer, I am here to kill that thing near you, but don't worry, you and the feline will soon join him, he said, floating from his spot in the sky. Rias stood up, as did Kaneko, readying themselves. However, Rias was thinking a mile a second, trying in vain to think of way to get out of this situation. It was very clear to her now as to the one who had killed Issei prior. It wasn't the Yuma girl, it was Kokobil that had killed him. But that wasn't as important as the fact to how they were gonna get out of this situation alive. But it was not to be, as Issei turned around, seemingly finding it in himself to even acknowledge Kokobil's very existence. No. Speaking out, he walked forward, passing both Rias and Kaneko. With them staring at his back, he raised his hand, the only thing not covered, which showed that even the flesh of his fingers had turned ash gray. His index finger pointed directly at Kokobil. His eyes set into the form of a glare. You are mine, he said. It wasn't anything else, but that of a statement. Clear and true. Issei's intention was clear as day to them all. And Kokobil's expression twisted into a form of amusement and disgust all into one. You dare challenge me, abomination? Fine, I'll end you where you stand, he said before he reached out with bow. Hands, and soon multiple spears of holy light much bigger than an average-sized one began to assimilate. No, Issei, don't. Rias tried to get his attention, to stop him from this foolhardy decision. But the masked Hyodo didn't even seem to hear her or acknowledge her. All that mattered in his eyes was Kokobil, the one who hurt and killed his second friend. His intention was clear in his golden, red orbs. He was going to kill this guy. He'd inflict as much pain as he could on this man who dared to lay a hand on Yuma. Die. Cackling out in glee, Kokobil sent out the vast spears of holy energy towards Issei. Bged on him, he didn't so much as move. No, he stood still as a mountain as the spears came in contact with his body, but like before, they were just absorbed into his body, dissipating the holy light as if it were a flickering ember. Seeing this made Rias and Kaneko's eyes widen, but Kokobil's gnashed his teeth in annoyance. He absorbed the spears, thought Rias, who was shocked at seeing such a thing happen. Yet again with your trickery. How about this then? Raising both hands into the air, he started to assimilate a giant holy spear that grew and grew the more energy he used. Soon enough the spear was as tall as mansion-sized building. The spear crackled with pure raw holy energy, its light near blinding for both Rias and Kaneko, who could feel their flesh just sizzle by the presence of spear. There was no doubt that spear would vaporize any high-class devils in an instant. Ha! Hurling the spear down toward the masked Hyodo, Kokobil watched, glaring down at this thing that dared to oppose him. Surely, yes, surely this time it would vanquish this thing for good. But his hopes were for naught, as Issei just kept glaring straight at Kokobil before he raised his hand towards the spear. It was of sheer instinct that drove him, making his body react accordingly to what was coming, and soon energy he had known since he was young was channeled into his hand, and he waited. He didn't need to wait long, as the spear came on him with the force of a giant. The ground crater beneath his feet, but he waited before forming his hand completely flat. Nailing his power at the edge of his hand, he moved, swiping his hand in a vertical motion toward the spear. It seemed as if nothing happened for a second until the spear slowly began to detach itself into two halves as the very winds was cut by something unseen. But it didn't stop there, because as the others watched on in shock at what they were witnessing, Kokubile never saw the entire right side of his wingspan shift before it was too late. Schlink. Pain. Unbearable amounts of raw agonizing pain erupted from Kokubile's right side, and the man showed as he let loose a gut-wrenching scream. Ah! His scream alerted both girls, who turned to see Kokubile holding his side, but falling from his body was half of his 10 black wings. Cut completely in half and straight through. Issei. Lean cut all through the bone and marrow. What have you done to me? He screamed as he tried to grow his wings back, but they weren't even reacting. Normally fallen angels were able to regrow their wings, since it was a part of their body and in their ability to regrow the appendage. But this time Kokubile couldn't muster up anything to regrow his wings. His soul felt as if were seared and dumped in a hole of the sharpest things in creation, piercing, slashing, cutting and stabbing into his soul. He turned to glare as the monster who did this to him, but his eyes widened in fright when he saw Issei's eyes glaring straight at him. Through him with the full intention to kill him dead in his eyes. The heavily scarred fallen angel felt his skin crawl at those eyes. ellipsis. Monster, you're a monster, abomination. He spoke incoherently, fear beginning to settle in once he realized the true danger that he was in. Finally acknowledging the mistake he had made, in his stupidity he had unleashed something far more dangerous than he'd ever seen before. Flee, I have to run, this thing, it's gonna kill me. Issei kept his glare in place and was gonna head toward Kokubile, but his eyes widened when he felt something within him churn up and rear its head. Its voice boomed with power that rattled his very mind. Time to take a rest, Issei. Stumbling, Issei reached up to his face only to let out a strained grunt. Ah, gah, he grunted, reaching up the mask covering his face only for it begin cracking through the middle. This alerted both Rias and Kaneko and they raced toward the boy. Issei, have a nice rest, Issei, we shall speak soon enough. The voice within his soul resonated, addressing him, he could feel it taking over. No, I must kill him. What consciousness Issei still had opposed the force, but was quickly overpowered by the sentient life within his soul. Do not be so hasty, you will get the chance to end him soon, but now we have more important things to deal with, now enough squabbling, good night. And that's all Issei heard before the mask cracked completely through down the middle and his body flickered the billowing black cloak seemingly started to vanish. He stood there with his eyes started to return back to their light brown ones. His hair began to turn back to its normal shade and the growth of his began to return to normal as well. He stumbled once more before his cloak began to vanish into nothingness, leaving his naked upper body free. Left only in his school pants and no shoes or upper clothing. Issei felt his eyes begin to droop. Exhaustion beginning to settle in his system. His vision went blurry before he started fall. Issei-san, senpai. Rias and Kaneko shouted, running towards his falling body before he was caught by them both, but his bone-white mask slid from his face in two halves. Falling to the ground in a clatter only, it began to vanish into white particles. Hitch soon faded into nothingness as well. Now's my chance to get out of here. Though his pride was immensely wounded, he was not suicidal to stay and risk getting himself killed by that thing. Kokubile turned his back on the scene, creating a portal. The scarred and pride-wounded Kokubile growled before he went into the portal, fleeing from the one who had scarred him to such a degree. But he had been seen by Rias, who had watched him flee, which caused her to look back down at Issei, whose head was situated on her lap. As Kaneko made sure everything of him was fine, Rias reached forward and parted his brown bangs from his eyes. Just enough so she could see him clearly. Once again you have exceeded my expectations. You may not know it now, Issei, but what you just did was simply amazing. You've just made Kokubile flee with his tail between his legs. You no longer interest me now, Issei-san. No. Now, you simply excite me beyond reason. She thought. A passionate smile began to form as she looked down at the sleeping form of her kohai. Oh, she knew it for sure now. Her gamble had turned out in her favor. Issei had shown her just how incredible he would become in the supernatural world. Yes indeed, the future looked very interesting, for everyone and especially for one, Issei. Will he be okay, Bushu? Kaneko spoke, standing alongside Rias with their gazes looking down at an unconscious Issei. The two girls were standing inside Issei's bedroom at the current moment, having brought him back to his house. That is after Rias used a small spell on his parents to erase their memories of the last few hours, including their son being so late and of the phenomenon not long ago. She and Kaneko brought Issei back home and laid him to rest, since after his whole deal with Kokobile and whatever was inside him had proven to be very taxing. Of that she knew had to be true, it had to be, since he just died, was resurrected through a forbidden spell on her part, resurrected someone back to life and fended off Kokobile enough to make him retreat. Yeah, that would tire out anyone, but, as she looked at Issei, her eyes softened as Kaneko kneeled at his bedside and just continued to gaze at him. Her small hand going up to his light brown hair that was once longer and jet black. Letting her fingers go through his hair, Kaneko looked to Issei's unresponsive face and then to Rias. Single quote ellipsis ... I'm sure he will be fine, Kaneko. Most people when they die and are reincarnated usually go into an unconscious state. And while he wasn't reincarnated, he still just needs rest. Though she said that, she was still worried just as much as Kaneko was for Issei. Back then when he was about to continue fighting Kokobile, it seemed as if it was as if he was struggling against something. She was sure that he was talking to someone or something else, but had been forced down by something and knocked the Hyodo out from inside. Nevertheless, she wouldn't push for answers from Issei. It wasn't her right to do that. Everyone had their secrets and she didn't have the right to pry into his. Even though she was the one to bring him back, she wouldn't do him bad like that, no matter how much she wanted to learn more about the increasing enigma that was Hyodo Issei. Plus, if his display prior to now was anything to go by, she didn't want to get on his bad side, ever. Rias shivered at that. Yes, she did not want to get on his bad list after witnessing all she had and felt from Issei. If there was one thing she was sure of, it was that her Kohai was going to be a wild card in their world, and personally she didn't want to be on the receiving end of those eyes. Rias frowned a tad when she heard the small grumble, and she looked to see leaning against the wall. It was that Yuma girl that usually accompanied Issei. She was fast asleep, having recovered from being resurrected by Issei, and was just recuperating from the experience. She had contemplated leaving her there, seeing as she had no reason to help the fallen angel. After all, they were still enemies even with the Great War having ended long ago. However, she couldn't do that, not after all that had happened. Not after what Issei did to bring her back from the grip of Hades, the Greek god who ruled over the realm of the dead. Such a feat in of itself was astronomically huge and yet daring all the same. Yet another reason why Issei simply fascinated her to no end. Nevertheless, Issei-kun brought her back to life and I'm inclined to keep her alive. I do want to learn more about him, and invoking his wrath would just be counterproductive. Thinking this, Rias nodded to herself. Unknown to her, Kaneko, who was currently running her hand through Issei's hair, was staring at his sleeping face with her usual impassive expression. But in her hazel eyes was a glimmer of something else, affection, though she dared tell no one. She was look at her senpai with affection, a feeling she hadn't said since being with her big sister Kuroka. Hesitantly she moved her hand to his face, and as she caressed his cheek the smallest of smiles grew. Senpai is warm again, was her thought, and she was glad too. Having Issei back from his changed state prior had eased her worries, and she was very glad to have her senpai back. While it seemed to Rias in her peerage that Kaneko had become fond of Issei, it was much more than just that. Frankly speaking, Tuju Kaneko had been at first downright terrified of Issei due to the aura he gave off when he first transferred to Kuo Academy. Due to her Ga Nekosho, a different variation of the Nekomata species, she had a high sensitivity to senjutsu, or in layman's terms, the life force, and because of this she was able to feel the life of the world around her. Her reach wasn't extensive since she was afraid of ever training with it, but it was enough so that she could feel for the entire Kuo Academy. Because of that, when Issei transferred into He Academy and made his first step in, she was overrun with a great amount of terror. Due to always leaking out the dark aura, it began to saturate her sensory field around the academy, and it led her being hit with wave after wave of screams. Nature itself was crying out toward her, yelling and wailing out in fear of its imminent demise. It was as if a dark foreboding shadow had cast itself over Academy, with her being nearly swallowed up in its blackness, while at the cause of it all being Hyodo Issei. She had nightmares for a bit after that, but thanks to the efforts of Kiba and Akino she was able to overcome them. She was afraid though that when she met Issei on their first encounter when she was being harassed by those other students, that those nightmares would return. But she had Proven wrong because despite what Issei's power had done to her, the man himself was not anything like it. He defended her, fiercely so she may add, was nice to her and chased off those that annoyed and bothered her. Treated her to sweets and made conversation with her despite her hesitance. It was a contradiction to how utterly cold his power was, and yet Issei himself had been so kind and warm to her. It's why when she saw him in that form not long ago that she had been both afraid of him as it rekindled that deep-rooted scare she received the first time around. But also a fear for Issei himself, since all she felt from him was just pain, so much pain resonating from his soul. It went out to her, his screams of anguish, his golden red eyes spoke of the despair he suffered when Yuma had died. He had changed in her eyes when he was in that form. He wasn't her Issei senpai anymore, no, he was just coldness incarnated. A specter of darkness that only radiated a soul-wrenching numbness, which threatened to snuff out all life and light around him. It's why she was so happy to have her Issei senpai back to normal. She never wanted to see him like that again, never again, but it was foolish to think otherwise now that he had died. It was inevitable now that he would be thrown into the supernatural world. I don't want him to be in pain again. I need to get stronger, so that next time I can fight by his side. So tied to this sudden surge of a thought, Kaniko's hazel eyes glowed a golden color before she leaned down till her face was inches from Issei's before giving a small peck on his forehead. Looking down at him, she whispered in his ear, making sure her king was unaware of her questionable actions. Sleep well, Issei senpai. Pulling away with a bit of pink dusting her cheeks, she went to hold his hand as Rias made sure everything was in order. Okay Kaniko-chan, we're done here, so let's go back and have Issei-kun rest, she said while preparing a transportation circle for the both of them. Since she knew sleeping with him to heal his injuries were out of the question due to having been healed beforehand by whatever it was that he became, she needed to use this time to help Sona get things back in order. No matter how much she wanted to stay and do just that, if not heal him, then to see the embarrassed face of her kohai. From what Akino says, he does need to loosen up. Sadly I can't. Well, at least today, she thought with a small smirk. Getting the circle ready, she looked towards Kaniko. Let's go, Kaniko. The white-haired Nekosho didn't look away from Issei, but nodded nonetheless. Holding his hand in his own for a moment longer, she stood up and let go, neither of the two not noticing a small wisp of black and blue leave from Issei's hand, and entered through Kaniko's. Hi Bushu. Walking to her king, both girls looked back at Issei before they vanished in a flash of red light. When they left, over the sounds of Yuma, Rainer's snoozes, laying on his bed. Issei's closed eyelids twitched, his fingers convulsed and began clutching at the sheets of his bed. And slowly, without a sound, a black mist began to leak out from his eyelids, nose and mouth, and with a will of its own it began to surround Issei's entire form. The darkness encroached, going to clutch on his form in his entire humanoid shape, and soon enough nothing of Issei was visible. Besides the shifting darkness that engulfed his being, hiding what was happening to him beneath the obsidian cocoon, but the most eventful of happenings was within his mind. Issei's mindscape, floating, weightless and airborne, free and unrestrained like that of a bird flying through the sky. That's how he exactly felt at the moment, like a bird, floating and drifting through the sky without a care in the world. Yes, he could get used this feeling, nothing to ever worry him, nothing to trouble him ever again. But then he frowned as images of people began to appear inside his mind. Wait, yes, they were familiar to him now. First it was a happy couple, his parents, the ones who brought him into this world and man he was today. Then a small girl with light brown hair and violet eyes who was looking at him with a megawatt grin even though her face was marred with mud and dirt. Ah, he knew this one as well. It was his first true friend, the one he hadn't seen since she left for England. Irina. The images didn't stop as more came and went, but a few stayed, 3 of which were familiar to him, though one he felt as if he didn't know yet he knew the person all the same. The first was a girl with white hair and hazel eyes which looked up at him with nonchalance, but there was a glimmer of content in her eyes. Images of him patting her on the head, sitting with her and eating together. Yes, he knew this girl. It was coming back to him now. Kaniko. Then another image appeared, one that which made his heart ache painfully. It was another girl with long silky black hair and violet eyes that just gleamed in happiness as she looked at him. What was this feeling he had when he looked at this girl? This painful thumping, the feeling of having his heart ripped to shreds. But why did her smile cause him such warmth? Why did her laugh feel with so much joy? Wait, I'm Sorry, Issei. She appeared again, but this time her eyes were weak, with her life growing weak. Our blood leaked from her mouth which ran down her chin. Wait, no, no, single quote. Yuma. His eyes flickered open as that memory came crashing back to him. It was all coming back to him now. His relationship with Yuma, his date with her. Relaxing in the park where Yuma and he just enjoyed being in each other's company while under the starry night sky. And then that man, Kokubile, appeared and started speaking of Yuma being a fallen angel. Her mission to kill him, her defying Kokubile and Yuma, she tried to protect me. He realized before she was tossed aside, and the last thing he saw or his vision went black was Yuma's dying body cast off to the side. He remembered a piercing pain going through him and the dull aching agony of growing weaker and weaker. But then he remembered a feeling of absolute rage, of pure hatred surging from within him, and after that all he saw was black. The memory swirled within him, but was slowly melding back into him before more memories came, and these memories he didn't know of, but he felt as if he had experienced them. Being in places he hadn't seen before, giant vast plains of grasslands, a purple sky and a realm of fire and brimstone, a world bathed in gold and white. Then people appeared, people he never knew and names he hadn't known began to meld into his mind, blending into his own soul. Amongst them he saw people that resembled humans, but had wings of different shapes and colors, some being white, gold, and black. Other creatures that he saw looked like crossbreeds of animals and humans, but then he saw these creatures, Drago. He corrected himself, that's all he could think as he saw them. Many of them varying from all shapes and sizes. Some bowed before him in reverence, others roared at him in challenge, and others lay broken and defeated by his hand. Among these dragons was another, ginormous in size. A flash of red caught his attention, golden eyes peering at him as if trying to stare him down before looking away in a huff. But then he saw something. No, it was a someone, a young girl from what he could see. Her back was to him, but he could describe her to be rather young. She was dressed in a attire consisting of a gothic Lolita fashion. Her long black tresses fell down her backside. Her hair shined with a blackness that was both foreboding yet in some way familiar to him. Now that he looked at her, he felt something in him churn, and it only got stronger as she began to turn toward him. Her pointed ears perked and twitched, her black hair parted way revealing a small smile aimed at him. That smile, this girl's presence. Why did it make him feel all these emotions? Content, happiness, companionship. It was strange to Issei as his hand clutched his chest, trying in vain to calm his erratic heart which felt as if it were going to burst from his chest. Who are you? He thought, but just as the girl was about to be fully facing him, she vanished, causing him to curse. He moved, situating himself until his feet was on whatever ground or floor beneath him. Looking around him, Issei felt a frown coming along. All he could see was just pitch black, for as far as the eye could, that's all there was. No trees, mountains, buildings, lakes, grass, no sky, not even a sun. There was just nothing here, just darkness. Where am I? He spoke, yet he didn't expect an answer anyway. And to be honest, he didn't want one. He just wanted whatever was happening to stop, all these memories that were melding with him. He clutched his head, fingers digging into his skull as he tried in vain to find some form of release from what he was feeling. It was like a pressure that was building up within him, and his head was crying out for a release. It came though, but in a way he hadn't expected. Do not worry yourself, Issei. You are just inside your own mind. His eyes snapped open wide as can be, and he turned to where he heard the force. But turning around he saw nothing but the empty black space around him. Gritting his teeth, Issei glared at the darkness around him, his frustration and stress reaching its limit. The strain of all these rushing memories was getting to him, and Steins began to peg at him, making it all the worse. Was Yuma truly dead? What happened to Kokubile? Was he dead? Who's there? Where are you? Right here. It was then everything stopped for Issei. It was as if time itself halted as a cold voice beckoned from behind him. He dared to turn. Slowly but surely he commanded his body to turn, and he did, despite the fact he felt his entire soul being frozen. It felt as if something was gripping his very being in an icy grip, and the slightest wrong move would result in his death. It was as he turned that Issei was greeted to a sight of something that was truly abnormal. It was a floating mass of mist or fog. It had a multitude of iridescent colors ranging from black, red, purple, green, white and blue. It was just about his size, and it Saint shifted and conformed as if it had a will of its own. Blinking, Issei just stared at it with a perplexed look. It was weird, but slowly he could feel all his stress be put at ease. Taking a step toward the fog, he tilted his head before reaching out toward it. I'm glad I could see the face of my incarnation, the force spoke seemingly unhindered by Issei's confusion, which only grew at the mist's words. Wait, what do you mean by incarnation? And I'm in my mind. What's going on? Holding onto his head, Issei scowled as he tried to remember. But the mist just shifted ntly before it began to move on its own accord. Its voice, a voice Issei was beginning to think he heard before, spoke up. It's as if said, you are my incarnation, you are the physical embodiment of that which I am. And as of now we are inside your mind. The voice spoke to the surprised Issei. The mist began to grow and began to form a shape, a humanoid one, and as it grew and took a form it began to show deeper characteristics to that of a human. What are you? He muttered, taking a step back as the form took shape, birthed from the mist and molded from the darkness that was his mind. The mist slowly began to seep into this humanoid form until soon it was gone, and in its place was something that made the Hyodo grow very pale. The figure was crouched but soon began to stand, and along the way it spoke. You already know who I am, Hyodo Issei. I have been with you since the day you died at birth. I have always been there watching and waiting as you grew into the man you are today. You should know who I am. After all, I am the reason why you feel that you are cursed. The humanoid spoke as it reached Issei's exact same height. It was a dawning realization for Issei as he beheld the form standing before him. It was coming to him now fully. Ryuti was saying. His light brown eyes stared back into a shade of golden red, his gaze staring into a reflection of himself. A mirrored image of him with every exact detail on the mark from his body structure, height and weight. Only differences were that his brown hair was jet black, his skin being deathly pale, and his golden eyes that bore back at him with equal analysis. It's you, you're the one who's been there, my shadow, the energy that's always been haunting me. You're the reason why I can see all those spirits. The reason why I'm so different from other people. It was all coming together now as he looked back at his own inverted reflection. The energy that's always been with him since for as long as he could remember. The reason why he could see the spirits of the dearly departed, and the reason as to why he had always been more physically fit than his generation. He was staring at the reason, the sole entity responsible for it all. He felt as if he should have been angry, hateful and spiteful, but he couldn't find it in himself to bring up any kind of emotion like that. No, the only thing he feel was a strange sense of familiarity, a sense of balance as he stood before his other half. He couldn't explain it, but it was something that resonated within him. It was something that was telling him that this entity was for all intents and purposes. It was at that moment Issei had an epiphany, a switch had been flipped, a long-forgotten truth that had been locked away at the very depths of his soul. Something he'd suppressed since he was young, it was coming back now, surging from within his body and coming to the forefront of his mind. Issei's eyes glazed over in realization. I get it now. Incarnation. The reason why you look just like me. You're not some evil spirit or such nonsense. No, you are me, aren't you? Questioning his look alike, but he knew it was the correct answer. He didn't know why, but he was sure that he was right. And he was, as the figure nodded before stepping toward Issei, who this time didn't step back from him. He didn't have a reason to. He didn't fear this entity. After all, why should he fear himself? I knew you would figure it out. You've picked up on what few mortals can perceive, even more or less understand. Yes, I am you just as you are me. We are one and the same, you and I. There is so much you need to know, but that will come to you eventually when we become one. The most important of details, however, you must be made aware of. Issei's reflection. His other half spoke as he laid his own on the Hyodo's shoulder. It was on that contact that all confusion within Issei was instantly swept away as his other half stared him, golden red eyes flashing with primordial power. Now realize what you are, behold what has come to pass, Hyodo Issei. And realize he did, for Issei's eyes glowed with that same primordial glow, and he saw all that his other half saw. The scene played out like a recording, revealing to him what had happened just after he blacked out from being killed by Kokobile. He saw himself in a third-person point of view and saw what was happening right before him. The rage, anger and hatred he felt burst out from within him, and it began to change his body. His light brown eyes slowly changed to a furious golden red. He saw his body explode with multiple colored energies that erupted from within his body, and soon it all began to meld into just a jet black color. The energy that he's felt since he was young exploded off him in waves. His changed eyes glaring at the fallen angel of legend before he saw himself roar at the sky, thus resulting in an explosion of all his power that's been inside him since he was but a newborn. He saw it all, the sky turning pitch black, the obsidian pillar erupting from him that pierced the sky. Witness it all, the time you died a second time and the time you were reborn anew. His other self's words echoed as he saw what happened. Through the blackness he saw it clear as day. Kokobile was floating in the sky looking down at where he was, staring down in terror at what had become of Issei. Then he saw himself, amidst the sea of ebony, standing lonesome, and what he saw both baffled him and awed him at the same time. His body was covered from his face all the way to his neck in a billowing black cloak that shifted and moved as if it had a will of its own. The bottom burned away into tatters and reformed, and the sleeves reached just to his wrists. His light brown hair had become a shade of ebony and was reaching his shoulder blades. But the biggest change was the one upon his face. His eyes widened when he saw himself stand up, revealing his face was covered by a white mask that resembled something akin to the front piece of a skull or of an executioner's mask. It was then Issei saw it. Glowing through the eye holes of this mask was two gold and red eyes which smoldered with an unmatched fury none could comprehend. He was left shocked to his core as he watched himself move, without a word, as walked towards a prone figure on the ground. He knew who it was. It was hard not to, for it was the very same girl that he'd befriended at Kuo Academy, Amano Yuma. The very same girl that became his second friend, the girl he'd spent time with. Ever so joyful and happy around him. But at the same time he remembered what Kokobile said about her. About her being something called a fallen angel, her true name being Rainer, and her mission to kill him. But she protected me at the end and died for it, he thought to himself as he saw himself walk towards Rainer, but along the way he saw a flash of red light and what it was appeared to be a crimson runic circle of some kind of origin. Appearing from the light was two girls, two very familiar girls at that, with one of them making him grow even more surprised. Kaneko and Rias Senpai, what are they doing here? He asked himself, but could only watch as the scene played out. The two walking up to him, Kaneko trying to bring him out of whatever had happened to him, but he never vocally responded to her. He just looked at her, and Issei felt a twinge of regret for scaring Kaneko with his eyes. He then saw himself look to Rias before looking back down at Rainer. He watched himself in amazement as he gently brought up Rainer's dead form, her dull lifeless eyes staring back at him, through him, and it showed that she truly was dead. However, he saw himself bring up his hand and jury up something which soon formed into a wispy-like sphere which gave off echoing cries and wails of a voice, Rainer's voice. He watched as he let the sphere go into her body and then healed her fatal wound to her heart. And as if a floodgate had been released, Issei felt immense relief wash over him as Rainer began to breathe again, her pulse returning to normal, and the beating of her heart returned once more. She's alive, thank goodness. He continued to watch after that, the proceedings of Kokobile revealing himself to the unaware girls which caught them off guard. He began to SCOWL as he saw the girls tremble before Kokobile's overwhelming presence. This angel guy must have been truly a terrifying being. But he was glad he saw himself step past the two and challenge Kokobile himself and save the two girls from facing Kokobile. And he was honestly amazed at how he saw the clearly one-sided fight progress. Those light spears did no damage to him and were simply absorbed into his body. Kokobile tried to obliterate him with an even bigger spear of holy light, but what he did next was simply shocking. Channeling the energy that's been with him since he was a newborn, he saw himself swipe his hand in a vertical motion. This resulted in the spear splitting in half, but it didn't stop there as he saw half of Kokobile's wings on one side of his body slowly detach themselves. They too having been cut by the invisible attack he unleashed. A smirk made its way on Issei's face as he heard Kokobile's painful agonizing scream, taking a sweet twisted pleasure in hearing that bastard suffer for all he Dick was wiped clean as he saw himself struggle, and it became clear to him what was happening. He remembered this, a stray memory buried deep within. Watching Kokobile flee, he looked down as he saw himself lose consciousness and fall into the arms of Rias, she and Kaneko trying to find out what was wrong. Closing his eyes, Issei willing cast the rest of it away and opened his eyes again to stare back into the face of his other self. He finally understood what he saw just then, the cause of what changed him. it was literally staring back at him. I see you understand then, yes. His other self spoke, making Issei nod. The mystery was becoming clearer now, why he changed into that form, where all that power came from. Yes, it's clear to me it came from you, from within my own soul. But I am still confused about something. I know I died, so how did I come back? This bugged him. He was sure he was killed by Kokobile, for he had felt that spear pierce his heart, instantly destroy it in mere seconds. What had brought him back from death? But it seemed his other half expected this and replied, how you came back to life is simple, but unique in of itself. Yo, you see Issei, for you to understand you need to know more about yourself. You already know that you died when you were born, but you came back to life through an unknown force, aka myself. The truth is, you haven't been technically alive, but more to the truth, you have been in between life and death since that day. You've been walking an astral plane, a limbo of sorts between the living world and the realm of the dead. Because of this, you were able to see the spirits of the dead, those that were still chained by their regretful mortal ties to the human world. Now because of this, when you were killed by that fallen angel, he merely ended your human half, and the other half that was suppressed and chained in the deepest part of yourself was unleashed. How it came out was because of that girl, Rias Grimori. She used a dark arts spell to resurrect you, a forbidden spell that had a nasty effect to kill the user if it backfired, but luckily it worked. Issei looked at his other half in astonishment, replaying what he just said. Rias had used a spell to bring him back to life. Then I owe her a debt, he thought resolutely. If there was one thing he would always stick to, it would be tea. Hat he would always repay those he owed one way or another, but his other half wasn't done and continued. You see, the spell was engraved on that brochure she gave you. She must have expected something to happen, and she wanted you to live. For what purpose, I am not sure, but because of her, instead of simply dying and becoming a true being of death, you were brought back and your soul was melded with my own. Thus, you and I became one entity, but our power was unleashed prematurely and resulted in a half-released, botched state. This resulted in that form you saw just now. Our power is unstable. And the only way for it to balance itself out is for me to fully embrace my other side, for me to welcome you into my soul instead of opposing you. I must welcome that which I have always suppressed since I was a child. He finished, causing his other self to show the smallest of smiles. It was a smile of pride. Correct, and it would seem you are ready for the merge itself. Your soul is ready. But something tells me you are hesitant about something. Speak your mind. There is only yourself and I within this plane of existence, he said, and Issei frowned before he looked down at his hands. It's just that, now that I know these memories, they are yours, and they show me that everything of the supernatural is real. Demons, angels, devils, fallen angels, all of it is real, and yet I ask myself, what am I? He stressed out each word while gazing back at his other half, who remained impassive throughout his words. Then he showed the slightest flicker of amusement, his golden, red eyes say, Emed to glow in mirth as if he just heard something that was funny. Issei, you should already know what you are. We, are a being that transcends even that of the supernatural. But here's a hint, we are an entity that is everywhere. We are an omnipresent force that's been with creation since the dawn of time. Our name is feared and strikes terror into the hearts of all things. Souls cry out, I end terror, and we reap that which has reached the limit of their life. We are that which is forever eternal. We have had no beginning nor end, he said as he placed his other hand on Issei's other shoulder. He was rewarded with a glaze of understanding coming into Issei's eyes. Then that means, you know we are death, he said. It was a statement which was proven correct as his other half confirmed his words with a nod before his body began to evaporate into a misty fog. Nothing else needed to be said as the misty fog infused itself into Issei's body. There was no pain, no struggle, no thing, as Issei fully embraced what he had suppressed for so long. It was a strange sense of serenity Issei felt as he became one with that which had ended his life as a newborn, but there was no anger, no hatred, just simple acceptance. And then Issei's body began to glow a bright white, which soon exploded from within the black realm that was his mind. Outside real world, Issei's eyes snapped open, only to see that he was staring up at the familiar ceiling that was his room. Slowly he pulled himself up from his position and moved his legs off the side of his bed. Standing up, he moved toward his mirror, and he was greeted to a sight that made him smile the tiniest amount. His once light brown hair had turned a tad darker, but it remained the same length as usual. There weren't many other physical changes than that, besides his eyes now having a reddish tint to them. Seems even with the merge it will take time for my body to grow into the changes. Hearing a slight mumble, he turned his head and saw, to his slight surprise, Yuma. No, Rainer, he reminded himself, who lay asleep peacefully against his wall. Seeing that she was here as well meant that Rias and Kaneko must have brought her along when taking him back home. Seeing her now, alive and well, made Issei feel true joy in that alone. Seeing that it was still early in the morning, he walked towards Rainer's sleeping form and gently picked her up in a bridal carry and carefully laid her in his bed. Making sure he didn't wake her, he pulled the covers over her before he went to write a note for her. I need to go and get my head on straight. All these memories need to be adjusted, and I need the silence for just that. A good morning jog will help. Laying it on his nightstand, he went and got dressed, which consisted of a white undershirt and a black tracksuit with white trimmings. He put on a pair of old running shoes and stood up to leave, but before he left he turned back and walked up to his bedside. Looking down at Rainer, he leaned down and moved a stray black bang from her face, and he smiled a bit more. I'm glad you're alive, Rainer. Whether or not you feel like you betrayed me, you still protected me till the end. I may not have many friends, but from now on I will do all I can to ensure I can protect the friends I have with all I can. Pulling his hand away, he made sure she was tucked in before leaving. Rainer, or as Yuma, was always welcome at his home, warmly accepted by his parents a while back, and she had stayed at his home a few times for study sessions. So there was no need to be worried about his parents being shocked about there being a girl in his bedroom when it came to her. Though he was suspicious of their looks between him and Rainer, but he put it away from his mind. Unknown to he missed Rainer's smile in her sleep before she snuggled deeper into his pillow. Issei. Outside the Hyodo residence, Issei took a breath of fresh air and looked up at the horizon. The sun was just breaking through the sky and was releasing its bright rays across the city. Looking up at the sky, he was glad to see the effects of what happened before were repaired. Thiel and the city Washington sent in absolute chaos, which was good considering he had more than enough to deal with. Beginning his jog, Issei began to let the memories filter through his mind, the memories of him being a human and the one of when he was death. He willed both to filter out from the cluster of a mess they were, and when he was sure of which belonged to where, he began to let both intermix in a balanced manner. The process was long, and Issei used that time to jog around his neighborhood a few times, and it wasn't until he felt his memories begin to settle that Issei decided to take a small break. Sitting down on a bench not far from his home, Issei leaned back and closed his eyes as he reeled in all that he had learned from the memories of his first life. The most prominent was the fact that the supernatural was in fact real, with all the things that humans have made up throughout history was in fact true. Heaven, hell, or the underworld, angels, fallen angels, demons, devils, mythical creatures, the pantheon of gods of each culture. The Christian mythology, Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Japanese mythology, Buddhist mythology, Hindu mythology, these were just a few, but it was all real. And he was there. The memories showed he had always been there, watching everything up to the Great War play out, watching the 7 princes of hell fight it out against God and his heavenly angelic forces, the fall of the Watchers Gregory, the alliance of the Devil's clans who allied with a number of demons and Yukai clans. Even the recluse dragons had either ignored the war or played a part in it. The memories of the war played through his mind, reminding him of all that had transpired until the point the war ended. It makes me wonder, do they still walk amongst humans? Do the angels still sit upon the heavens and make those that are faithful to their teachings do their work for them? What about those that have fallen? Where have they gone since the Great War ended? And what of the devils and demons? How have they recovered since those times? And what of the dragons? He thought to himself, pondering on all that he was learning, or well, in this case relearning. It was an experience that was for sure. To relive his first life was something to be unique. It made him chuckle bitterly, to think I've been the incarnation of death itself. Me, Hyodo Issei, being the physical embodiment of the primordial deity, eternity. Hey, leaning back, his bitter smile grew as his dark brown bangs shadowed his eyes. Bringing up his hand, he channeled the smallest amount of energy he could muster, and he frowned. When he saw his hand flickered with a blackish aura, willing it away, he sighed as he spoke to seemingly no one. I guess I have to accept it, the fact that I am no longer human. Suddenly, and with Outwarning he felt it a slight breeze in the air, a scent that he knew on an instinctive level, a presence that he had known for so long and yet hadn't felt for eons. His smile vanished and his expression went neutral. Shifting his head forward, his brown, reddish eyes stared through the bangs of his hair. His gaze landing on a figure, a very familiar figure at that, who was just within arm's reach of himself. Brown, reddish orbs stared into a pair of surprised gray orbs, and at that moment Issei spoke, with his voice remaining completely neutral. "And now we meet again. How long has it been, Infinity?" He said the name without emotion, his gaze staring deep into the gray orbs of Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, the infinite dragon god. The small girl stared back at Issei with no small amount of surprise in her eyes. She spoke, intent to respond back to the one she so wished to be reunited with for so long. It has been far, far too long, eternity. And thus the reunion of the primordial gods had come at last after so many eons. Neutral brown, red eyes stared into a pair of surprised gray orbs, analyzing the person before him. Hyodo Issei, the primordial deity, death, sat staring into the face of his counterpart. It was a female who had the appearance of a young girl with long silky black hair that fell like a smooth ebony silk curtain which reached her backside. She had a milky white complexion, while her attire consisted of solely a gothic Lolita dress, but she had nothing covering her feet. Standing before him was the equivalent of his own existence, and if his memory served I am correctly, then this was the first time he's seen her for a very long time. Eons to be exact, he corrected himself. If memory served accurately, then he hadn't seen her for that long, and it wasn't because of his choice, mind you. It was hers, staring back at him with a swirl of emotions ranging from surprise, anxiety, happiness, confusion, and the slightest bit of nervousness. One may begin to wonder why she felt this way, but it could only be understood between herself and Issei. If anyone at the current moment who knew this girl saw her this way, they would be astonished or would be questioning as to why she would be showing such emotion. After all, this in the eyes of the rest of creation was the enigmatic legendary Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon and the infinite dragon god, a figure highly feared and revered at the same time. But even if such people were there, they wouldn't be acknowledged. This was a reunion long in wait for the both of them, a very anticipated one for Ophis, who stared back at Issei with equal intensity. The wind blew through her long obsidian hair, and for the longest of moments that seemed to drag on for light years, the two kept their stare with one another. Finding no fault in each other's form, studying each other's eyes, looking at each other's soul with masterful ease. If anyone saw this scene, they wouldn't have known that they were looking at the primordial deities that were as old as the dawn of time itself. And then with the smallest of gestures, Issei scooted to the side and welcomed her. "Come, sit," gesturing to the empty space beside him. She raised a delicate brow, but did not wait a moment longer and took a seat beside him. The two sat there looking out to the sky and watched the begin to rise further and further. A tense atmosphere was between the two. That is until Ophis broke the ice between the two. "I see you've found yourself a material body," she asked, only for Issei to frown before closing his eyes. "No, this isn't just a physical body. Unlike you, I incarnated myself into a mortal," he said, making her eyes widen in surprise before she turned her head to look at Issei. However, understanding began to appear in her gray obs before she gave a nod. "I see, that explains the difference, plus I can feel the another soul within you, is it?" She trailed on, getting Issei to nod in response. "Yes, after being incarnated he was woken up from within my soul, but for now he sleeps until I ask for him." He knew what she was asking him, about the other soul who dwells within him. The being that was placed inside him at birth. He was awakened at the same time he was killed by Kokobile, but was put to sleep until such a time that Issei felt he would need to call for him. "I see," she said, and silence soon fell for the two. Issei saw that it was reaching morning, so students for Kuo Academy should be waking up soon and getting ready to leave. "I'll be running a tad late though," he sighed as he felt Fi's looking at him, trying to discern him, and he decided to confront her about this. "So why are you here, Ophis? Figured you would never leave the dimensional gap," he said, addressing her by the name she took upon herself long ago. One of his stray memories came to him, and it was of Ophis speaking of that realm always having the silence and quiet she always wanted. She averted her gaze and seemed to mumble something, but he heard her perfectly well. "I can no longer enjoy the dimensional gap like I used to. That fledgling great red got too powerful in your absence and has taken refuge inside and has been causing a ruckus since then." It was a hesitant admittance on her part and his brow perked up at that. The Mamor had what he was called now, Great Red. He was a very special dragon, or he was a very unique dragon who represented the illusions of dreams, but still he was but a very young dragon back then, always being a stubborn hothead, but to think he would become powerful enough to throw infinity out of the home she's used since the dawn of creation. His eyes narrowed on her. What's the real reason you're here? Even if Great Red became that powerful, you are still infinity and your power is absolute. He should be of no trouble to you, so why are you really here? It was the truth for as far as he knew. She was his counterpart, his equal in existence. Why would she be unable to force that fledgling out of the dimensional gap? He glanced to her, but raised an eyebrow when he saw her avert her gaze from him. And was he mistaken, or was there a pinkish hue on her cheeks? Single quote ellipsis dot. I never could get past you. Yes, I may have another reason, softly spoke she. Looked up at Issei with a hesitant frown on her face. The Hyodo looked back at her with a perplexed look which just got deeper as the pinkish hue on her cheeks got darker. I wanted to see you, Eternity, she said as her hand slowly went to grasp his own, causing his eyes to widen slightly at her words. A sudden influx of memories hit him then, of when he was just the formless entity, and it made him remember exactly why they were separated in the beginning. Narrowing his eyes, he removed his hand. That's funny, because I seem to remember that you wanted to be alone after all life had been formed. It was your choice to leave, so why come back? There was a tad bit of bite in his tone, and Ophis flinched at it, but she couldn't blame him for being that way. She did leave under rather stressful times for the both them. It hadn't been fair to Eternity back then to leave him with the aftermath of the megaton supernova that both spawned life and destroyed it. But at that time she just wished for complete and utter solitude. Nothing else mattered to her at that one point in time, but she had been wrong to have done that. And to him of all people. It had been a mistake she regretted since the day she separated herself from him. She retracted her hand, a bit hurt, but she understood all the same. I know that, and there is no way I can ever ask for your forgiveness due to that selfish act on my part, but I've regretted that choice. It was a mistake. After the Great War, one wanted to come see you. But after you harvested the souls that died, you vanished, even from my senses. At that time it was as if you wiped yourself from existence. I thought something had happened to you. I grieved for so long, thinking I wouldn't ever be able to apologize to you for what I did. She said this while holding her hand, cherishing what lingering contact she had with the man beside her. Issei just kept his gaze dead set ahead of him, just staring out at nothing in particular, that is, until he sighed and began to rub his forehead, fighting a slight headache. He could tell Infinity Ophis was truly and honestly heartfelt in her words. But it was a scar that wouldn't go away no matter how much time passed. But he couldn't allow himself to carry the grudge against her, especially not after being incarnated. It just wasn't right. Single quote ellipsis dot dot. There is a saying among these mortals, Ophis, and that is, people can forgive the sins of another, but they will never forget them. You're sorry and you mean it, I forgive you, but I won't forget it either, he said with the slightest grumble. He scowled when her eyes widened to a great degree, and he remained stone still as she scooted closer to him. Single quote ellipsis dot. Thank you, softly spoken as ever, but he heard her words. He could feel the gratefulness in her tone, and it made him smile the slightest inch. However, he felt her piercing stare on him and decided to speak. What is it, Ophis? Single quote ellipsis dot. What happened to you? After the Great War you vanished from all of creation. You changed from the Eternity I once knew. Something is different about you now, she said, pondering on the change that had happened to him. He gave a sigh but answered nonetheless. You already know this, but after you left, I chose to take up the mantle of the one who was to balance out the results of what light and darkness had created. Thus I became what history sees me as. I became death. I had to be the one who reaped the souls of the living to counterbalance the en masse of life that spawned in the three realms. Be they mortal, demon, angel, devil, god or animal, it had become my responsibility to make sure the balance was kept in check. I rarely ever checked up on you, and had may have been because of my own stubbornness, he said, remembering the duties he once held during those ancient times. He could feel her gaze on him, but he continued unperturbed. I spread myself out among the three realms, becoming an omnipresent force by the time the Great War initiated. After the war was finished and I had harvested all the souls that had vanquished and sent them to their respective places, I cast myself out I long for a change in my own existence, and I found it by incarnating my essence in one who I felt was worthy, which is what happened prior. There was a slight change in the incarnation, but it worked, and I incarnated myself with a mortal named Issei, and melded ourselves as one entity. Our personalities, souls, views in the world mixed as we became one, so that will explain if I seem different. I see, she said, contemplating on what was spoken. Her orbs took great interest in his appearance, as unlike her who created her body through nothingness of her own existence and the essence of her soul. Eternity gained his body through incarnation through a mortal human. He must have experienced many things that she was alien to up until this point. So what have you been up to in my absence? Deciding to further the conversation, Ophis looked up at the sky and gave a small sigh. Well, as you know, I can't enjoy the dimensional gap like I used to, and all because of that ignorant fledgling Great Red. So I've been building up a force to help take it out, gathering up all sorts of figures from different backgrounds and heritages to face it, angels, devils, demons, humans with heroic ancestry, and others. I've named it the Chaos Brigade. Would you want? She was about to ask, but he cut her short with a quick and simple retort. Not interested. His lips twitched upwards when he saw her give the equivalent of a pout before deciding to elaborate. I have no need to concern myself with your army of disaster. That red fledgling never crossed me and does not warrant my wrath. And until such a time happens, if it happens, I will stay my hand. But I am curious how you can lead such a vast army of individuals that are former enemies and keep them in line. What do you do to make them follow your word? He said, half expecting her to say something intelligent and resourceful. I just told them to help me kill Great Red, and nothing else would matter to me. Single quote, ellipsis dot, ellipsis dot, ellipsis dot. What? He spat out in surprise, his tone lowering down to the lowest whisper as he stared at his counterpart with wide eyes. Ophis, not understanding his surprise, tilted her head. What? Are you telling me you have gathered up an army of supernatural entities, former enemies at that, and have led them with solely one goal: to kill Great Red, and if they help you then nothing else mattered to you? His answer was a nod which made him stare at her even longer, as if he were looking at a foreign creature or alien. You cannot be serious. He placed his hand over his face and sighed as Ophis just kept looking at him with a perplexed look, acting completely innocent and as if she hadn't said anything outrageous. Single quote, ellipsis dot. You're naive if you think they will follow your command solely based on such a loose goal, Ophis. If they don't follow your rule to the letter and begin threatening the balance, he said, staring at her through the cracks of his fingers. His eye took on a cold glaze that made her ruled. She should know how important it was for the balance to be preserved. If she could gather up such a force of mixed races, then good for her. He didn't care. However, what he did care about was the balance, and if it were to be put in peril, then Armageddon will be unleashed upon all of creation once again. Single quote, Don't worry, I will make sure that they stay under my heel. She stuttered, which made her flush in embarrassment. Even now, after just incarnating himself, eternity can still put her in line. It was both scary and exhilarating to her. It was a joyous day to know her equal was back. Issei removed his hand and kept his eye on her for a good moment longer, and she would have began squirm had he not cut his gaze away a second later. See, it stays that way then. Silence fell upon the two again, but it wasn't a tense atmosphere like it once was. Looking up at the sky, Issei saw that it was reaching that time. It's near time to get ready for another day at the academy, and I have some questions for little Miss Grimori-san. His eyes narrowed on that thought about his crimson-haired senpai. She used that spell on him and wanted him to live for a reason, and he wanted to know why. Standing up, he glanced to Ophis. Well, I gotta go. If there isn't anything else you wanted to talk about, then I must be off. But Ophis moved before he could take a step. Her hand grasped onto his tracksuit, making him stop. Looking over his shoulder, he saw her look up with a somewhat strange look in her eye. Single quote, ellipsis dot. Let me come with you. I don't want to be separated from you again, please. She asked, no more like pleaded with him to let her stay with him, to be by his side again after so long of being alone. He just kept looking at her while inwardly he contemplated if such an idea was good or not. Single quote, ellipsis dot. It's not like it will hurt anything. Sure, Ka-san and Tu-san may find it strange, but I'll probably be lit to spin it off should they ever find out about her. Plus, from what I feel, her power has strangely declined in my absence, so keeping her with me until it's recovered is essential. Sighing yet again. something he was taking notice of doing a lot of late. Looking down at Ophis, he took her hand and nodded, making her face light up with a brightened expression. Very well, but how will you manage your Chaos Brigade while you're with me? He asked, causing her to smile the slightest bit before she raised her other hand, and he watched with a raised brow as a couple of black snakes slithered out from her sleeve. Simple, I just have to create a copy of myself with about 1/3 of power supply. That should be sufficient enough for them to take my copy seriously and not ask questions, she explained. The snakes left her hand and began to form an exact copy of her, down to every exact detail. Appraising the copy, he turned to the original Ophis, whom shooed the clone away, whom nodded, knowing what her objective was, and vanished. Resourceful, but you will need to follow one condition if you're going to be staying with me for the time being, he said, causing her to tilt her head. Like, I certainly can't have those that know of your existence see you around me. When we're alone that's fine, but I don't want the hassle of other supernatural beings prodding about you, he said, making her tilt her head before smiling. I got it. Making sure no one was around, she raised her hand. She jumped before she was enveloped in a poof of smoke. When it cleared, Issei saw that she had shifted herself into a low-flowing black scarf, which he caught and gave it a look. It was a simple black scarf with tattered ends, but with a faint design of a dragon. That'll work, I guess, he said as he saw a pair of gray eyes appear from within the scarf which looked at him. Yes, some believe I can just shape-shift into different people, but shifting into objects isn't beyond my reach. He heard her from within his mind, causing him to roll his eyes before he wrapped the scarf around his neck. Securing her around him and letting the end flow behind him, running a hand through the scarf, he let out a small smile as he felt Ophis enjoy the touch. Welcome back, Infinity. Pulling the scarf up to hide his mouth, he heard her hum with appreciation within his mind. Glad to be back, Eternity. Hearing this, Issei started to walk away, intent on heading back home to get ready for the academy and to deal with the problems ahead of him. One of which he was sure was Yuma Rainer's dilemma and Rias Grimori's motives with bringing him back to life. But as he was leaving, he felt Ophis ask him something that nearly made him trip in surprise. By the way, why are you going to an academy? Feeling a sweat drop begin to form, he sighed before patting the scarf around him. Because since many around me, including my parents that brought me into this world, consider me human, I'm intent to at the very least attain an education, as they say. She remained silent for a moment before she gave an honest response. I think it's a waste of time, she said, since it cut off her to spend with Eternity Issei by a good margin. Issei just chuckled, but continuing on. Underworld Grimoire Castle. Sears X Lucifer was not in the best of moods today as he sat alongside his wife Graphia. He rubbed his temples as his wife handed him a cup of tea, which he took gratefully. All this damage, this hasn't happened for so long, he said. Currently he was going through a number of reports issued to him that spanned his territory as the Lucifer Satan. Since the Apocalyptic Omen, a title created by a number of Elder Devil Seers, which ended up with all four mouths being flooded with reports of incidents ranging from damages to many of their cities, including both the original capital Lucifad and their current devil capital city, Lilith, were damaged greatly in the wake of the disaster. It just went to show whatever caused this had the power to even bypass their protective barriers and wards and destroy much of their cities with ease. That wasn't even taking into consideration of the multiple unstable points across their realm. Even after the event had passed, it still left lingering effects on the underworld and their realm itself. Reports came in about multiple unstable points that were in need of repair, which came as one of the major priorities to the Yondai Mao, which were himself as Lucifer, Leviathan, Asmodeus and Beelzebub. It was an integral part to have the realm that kept the underworld in full repair, otherwise if left unchecked it could cause an imbalance and threaten the very underworld itself. Then there was the transportation monorail, allowing them an easier passage from the underworld into Earth, which was out of use due to the rails having been destroyed. That wasn't even counting the fact the dimensional gap they had to pass through was still unsafe due to being affected as well by the event. To even begin repairs would take a lot of time and resources for not just his people, but for all the Maozen of the 34 of the 72 noble devil clans. He could already hear the elders of many of them complaining about spending so much of their budget, but he wouldn't have any of it. This was for the underworld as a whole and to keep it, their home, from falling apart and into disarray. Then there was the amount of casualties that had happened, and by Satan himself, there were far too many for Issei to account alone. It seemed many were GHT by the flood of darkness and were neither never seen again or were reduced to ashes. Detailed reports specified that their bodies were just rotting away, as if time itself fast forward for them and reduced them to nothing but empty dried up husks or just ashes. And personally, from what Issei saw what this darkness did across the underworld, he felt those devils were lucky to have died that instead of being sucked into the darkness. This was a big impact to the devils as a whole, since many of the devils that died were either some pure bloods or high-ranking reincarnated devils. He sig, head-dropping-esque before leaning his head back as he tried to ease his headache and growing unease of the whole situation. Why did this have to happen? The underworld has been so peaceful since the Great War ended. Everything was going smoothly and this happens. Grafia, worried for her husband, laid her hand on his shoulder, which he felt and was appreciative for the gesture. Please don't exert yourself, Issei. No one could have predicted something like this to happen, and you know as well as I that no peace can last without trouble brewing its head, she said, and it was true that he knew he just wanted this era to be peaceful for a good few more years. At least until his sister had matured and was ready for whatever was coming. I know, it's just that I'm worried, Besed. All this chaos in our own home. I'm worried about Rias in her peerage. Seraphal's been wanting to go to Earth to see if her sister and her group is fine, but with all the work piling up in the Urworld in such a state, she's needed to stay as well. And there's also the fact the other noble clans are causing a ruckus since that event passed. I mean, Grafia, they're even talking about this being caused by the Kumau Ha. Old Satan faction. His words made her silver eyes narrow at that. The old Satan faction had been very quiet, nearly non-existent in their movement, but if this were true. Single quote. If it's true, then would they be declaring war by doing this? She asked, only for Issei to sigh before shaking his head. No, though they are incredibly stubborn and foolhardy at times, even they old not stoop this low as to attack their own home world like this. Besides, even they do not possess the sheer raw power to do something of this magnitude, he said, although he wasn't entirely sure of it himself since information on them was scarce. There is also word of the Phoenix clan causing a number of incidents as well. Issei, she reminded him, causing him to give a slight curse. Oh yes, how could he have forgotten about that? To be honest, the entire clan was starting to reach the end of his nerves. Ever since the incident ended, they had been flooding the Grimoire clan with hundreds of notices about them wanting to bring back Rias from the Earth, all in due part because of the political marriage set between her and the heir of the Phoenix clan, Riser. Just thinking about that boy, Riser, made Issei very unhappy. The third son to the Phoenix clan was, in his honest and personal opinion, a slimeball piece of trash that didn't deserve to even be in the same presence as his little sister. And if he had his way, the boy wouldn't even see the light of day again with his demands for Rias's hand in marriage. But the marriage contract was set between his father and the Lord Fiend. X is a way to create a bond between both clans and help establish this through a union through both the third son of the Phoenix and heiress of the Grimoire. Since pure-blooded devils were becoming arity, it could prove to be a beneficial boon if a pure-blood child was created through that union. Yet it made him sick to his stomach that his sister was being forced against her will to marry that little brat. It was a good thing he was able to step in at the time and give her leeway to go to Earth so she could try to find her own way out of this contract. But beyond that, he couldn't do anything else. Honestly, why Tu-san and Ka-san continues to support this endeavor is beyond me. He thought with a tad bit of spite. It was clear to him Rias didn't want anything to do with the marriage, and he figured their parents would respect that, but they were too traditional to see it that way. It was a miracle that he was even able to get them to agree with his plan for Rias alone. Currently his parents were away to the Phoenix clan to try and reason with them about the current situation. I know, Grafia, I'm just hoping Tu-san and Ka-san can reason with them and hold them off for just a little longer. He said, to which she nodded. She knew her husband disliked the entire thing to a great degree and she couldn't blame him. Rias' fiancé, Riser, was just not a suitable man for her nor for any woman. He was, in her mind, an arrogant, womanizing, sexist pig that wasn't suited to be married to her little sister-in-law. Thinking about his sister Issei sighed, I hope Rias is okay. Earth Hyodo residence. Amano Yuma Rainer, fallen angel, and member of the Grigori organization, had never anticipated to find herself in this type of situation. Her long black hair was a bit damp and was brushed in a way she liked it. She had just gotten out of the shower and was currently dressed in her spare school uniform she had left at the Hyodo home. Currently she was in said home, sitting down at the table eating breakfast with Issei's parents. Her body was acting on auto drive, eating and answering her questions from Issei's parents. But inwardly she was numb to the whole whirl. As she tried to desperately figure out how she ended up in this situation. Kokubile killed me, I know he did, and yet here I am, alive and well. What happened? She thought to herself in confusion. She remembered it all from having a date with Issei, which made her flush a bit, to relaxing in the park under the starry night sky. And then Kokubile appeared, revealing who she was to Issei and attacking both her and the Hyodo. She remembered it all in clear detail, how she tried to defend Issei, protecting him and apologizing to him in her final moments. His shocked, haunted look, even now did her body tremble from the look in his eyes as darkness overcame her. Think, Rainer, think, try and remember, and she did, trying to think back to what had happened just before she died. The only thing she saw was Issei being killed by Kokubile, but then the unimaginable happened. Issei began to change in her dimming vision. Black energy began to leak off him, his hair had grown to his should. Our blades and had turned pitch black, and his normally warm brown eyes flashed a cold golden red. And there was also the fact his face was being covered by something. What was it? A flash of a porcelain, bone-white mask with the shape of a frontal skull appeared, and had she not the self-control, she would have jumped with a slight scream. I remember now. What happened to him? What happened to us? Why are you leaving me with so many questions, Issei-kun? She thought to herself, thinking back to when she woke up an hour and a half ago. She was very surprised to find herself not dead, but in fact alive and in Issei's bed. It was normal at times for her to fall asleep in his bedroom, since she had done it a few times when she came over to study with him, which ended up in a few embarrassing situations. But never in his very own bed, and she could tell he was there recently due to his warmth and scent still there. She did her best to hide her cheeks flushing to a scarlet when she realized where her thoughts went on that part. She shook her head of that and remembered that after waking up and realizing she was actually alive, tried to find Issei, but unlike before she couldn't sense his presence anywhere in the vicinity. It was then she found the note he left for her, and she was both relieved and a bit apprehensive of what it said. He had gone out on his morning jogs and would be back in time to be ready for school. But she was nervous to see him, since it also said that they would be discussing the matters with what happened last night. Did he know? If so, how? He was a human, wasn't he? She was sure he didn't want anything to do with her again after finding out what she did. So many questions rang through her head at that moment that she just wished Issei would hurry back so she could have them answered. Briefly she wondered if her fellow fallen angels had fallen by Kokubile's hand, but then again that man wouldn't waste time and risk alerting Azazel and Shemhazai. Honestly, he's taking longer than usual. I wonder if he's okay. She was brought out of her musings when she heard Issei's mother speak only for his father. Oh, don't worry, love, Issei should be here any minute now, he said before they heard the door open, causing him to smirk. And speak of the devil and he shall appear. The two missed Yuma's flinch and nervous expression as the sound of footsteps came closer until the door opened, revealing Issei. Sorry I'm late, Ka-san. To-san, I took a small detour on my way back and bought myself something for the winter, Issei said with a smile while pointing to his black scarf. His parents seemed to take notice of it and nodded. That's okay, but you better hurry and get ready for school. You don't want to have Yuma-chan go alone, right? His mother said, causing him to blink before he turned his gaze toward a silent Yuma who glanced at him. His eyes met hers, and for a moment she couldn't tear her gaze away from his. It was for only a moment before his mouth slowly formed into a smile, a knowing smile that made her eyes widen before he looked towards his parents. Yeah, I got it. Grabbing a piece of toast he ran upstairs to get his uniform before heading to the shower. An hour passed and soon Yuma and Issei were leaving his house and heading on their way to Kuo Academy. Both were in their respective academy uniforms. Only Issei had his scarf around his neck. Issei had his sack of supplies slung over his shoulder, and Yuma thankfully had some supplies left at his house, had them in hand. To others it would seem like the two were just fellow classmates. But on the inside it was much different. Yuma was nearly sweating in nervousness. The atmosphere around her and Issei was so tense you could cut it with a butter knife. Every now and then she would dare to glance his way, but look away just as quick. She didn't know what to say or even how to begin to break the ice between them. She wasn't sure if all that happened last night was real or if it was just a dream. Did he know? Had she dreamed it all? She didn't know and she was a bit scared to find out. Deciding to look his way again, she sighed before speaking. It was better now than later. So, she was silenced when his hand landed on her shoulder, caused her to flinch, but she looked up and she blinked a few times when she did. Had Issei always been this tall? It was sudden thought that entered her mind as she looked up at the Hyodo. Sure, he was always tall for his age, but as she looked up to him, becoming nearly lost in his brown-red eyes, she felt something had changed in him. Rainer, before you say anything, let me just say, despite what you did in the past or were ordered to do, just know that I forgive you. His words fought him and her eyes widened once she heard her name, her true name be spoken by him. But there was no deceit, no anger, no hatred, just pure unadulterated warmth in his eyes. He knows. How do you? But, why? I don't understand. She struggled to speak, but his arms circled around her shoulders and pulled her flush to his side. Feeling the rippling of his wiry muscled arm and body made her tingle delight. It's simple. We can talk about it after school, but for now just know that even though you were ordered to kill me, you still became a very close friend. Instead of following through with your order, you protected me and died doing so. Because of that, I couldn't hate you no matter how much it hurt. You can tell me whatever you wish at any time and when you feel comfortable about it. I know all I need to know, so don't worry about keeping it a secret from me. Don't be so tense around me, okay? He said, meaning every single word. He'd been thinking to how address her about the situation, but he just decided to be upfront and blunt about it. He had been hurt and felt a bit betrayed, but Yuma had defended him and died, giving her life for him. She had become a very safe friend to him, and despite his new status he was going to cherish Rainer as much as he would cherish Irina and Kaneko. Single quote ellipsis dot. Issei, thank you. He smiled as she leaned herself against him, keeping her steady. Although he felt a bit cynical with his change, what would never change is his loyalty to the friends he had. He felt close to you, Rainer. He corrected himself, as close as he felt to Rina before she left for England, and it was the same with his little Kahai, Kaneko. Unknown to him, Rainer was staring up at him and one of the most brightest sad smiles adorned her beautiful features. You already know, and yet you forgive me. I don't deserve someone as special as you. And unknown to even her and Issei, Ophis within the scarf frowned at fallen angel that is hanging on to her eternity. Oh yes, Ophis would be watching this girl very very closely. Unknown location. The sound of cackling bones echoed all around the dimly lit chamber. The souls of the damned screamed and wailed in an endless agonizing symphony as they swirled in a giant vortex, heading towards their imminent punishment, reaching the purgatory where all souls of the damned go. Having had judgment passed down on them, those sentenced to damnation were sent here and were distributed through the vortex of souls. Each soul with a certain level of sins would be sent to an adequate circle of hell, pending on what those sins were the majority of. Be they of lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud and treachery. There was no mercy, no love or passion, just cold punishment for the sinful with no hope of retribution for anyone in this place. Hanging above this vortex was a number of rocky platforms which were strung up by a number of giant spiky black chains. Guarding these platforms were a new MBER of armored skeletons and undead warriors and sorcerers. While walking past them were a number of humanoid figures with billowing black cloaks that covered most of their bodies, along with a hood that shadowed their faces. Held in hand were long wooden scythes, although some had alterations to their weapon of choice. Amidst these platforms the lowest one led deeper into the catacombs of the area. Deeper and darker it became until finally it was a giant chamber. It was a throne room decorated with corpses, skeletons and skull braziers made of bone, and skulls of demonic creatures hung among the walls and were lit with blue fire. Standing guard at the entrance and along the walkway were a number of heavily armored skeletons with bits of rotten flesh still clinging to their body. Their eye sockets glowed with an unholy blue light, showing that it was the only sign that they had some life in their reanimated bodies. Leading up to the throne sat a single figure garbed in priest-like robes. It was another skeleton that was much taller than the rest and gave off a creepy and malicious aura. So intense it would have threatened to snuff out all life in the area if such a being were amongst those of the living. Its skull was covered by a hood, but it grinned as the skeleton's eyes bore down at the figure standing before him. So, how do your new wings feel, Kokobile? The skeleton cackled, humor escaping its body causing its ribcage to rattle as the figure before him, Kokobile, in all his fallen glory, smirked up at the figure with a glow of respect. He tested his new wings on his one half, made entirely of torn flesh and bone and hummed in content. They feel very adequate, Lord Hades. His smirk stretched across his face, his yellow eyes glowing with a hint of madness as the Olympian god, ruler of the realm of the dead, brother of Zeus and Poseidon, cackled further. His eyes flashed with an unholy light as they bared down on his newest subject with twisted glee. Very good, thanks for watching. The dimensional gap was an endless void that stood in bet.